In a distant Murim, warriors take on jobs to earn a living. The protagonist landed one such task. Receiving his instructions, he realized the mission was truly perilous. Caught in an unforeseen trap, he had no idea what would happen next. Arrows rained down in their direction. Spotting the arrows aimed directly at him, he dodged and fled from the target. He knew he'd been right all along. He never should have taken this mission. Accepting such a risky job, he'd sensed something was off. Most of the warriors in his group had perished due to the trap. Earlier, the old man had asked why he was so hesitant. Did he not trust them? The mission was simple. Just locate a special stone slab inscribed with writings. The boy replied he didn't fully trust them. He'd never seen the old man in Murim before, so how could he take his word? The old man nodded, understanding, but pressed why the boy was truly reluctant. The boy asked if the old man lacked precise details. Vague information often meant no guaranteed payment. Such missions carried a high risk of death. But the old man didn't prolong the talk, tossing a bag of gold coins onto the table. In the moment, the boy realized the payment for this mission was too substantial to refuse. Suddenly, his ally leaped over him, shouting for him to move. The ally unleashed a devastating whirlwind punch. The blow was so powerful that it shattered stones and trap mechanisms alike. The boy rejoiced. His partner was the second-ranked warrior in strength. He felt his earlier worries were baseless and was glad he hadn't backed out. But it wasn't so simple. The man, shocked, demanded to know what was happening and where this came from. The boy, terrified, realized shouting was unnecessary. Unknown monsters lurked alongside the traps. The creature was massive, clearly displeased by intruders in its domain. The man, speechless, asked what it was. The monster didn't respond, swinging its enormous hammer. The man couldn't dodge, but the boy was flung back several meters by the impact. The strike was so forceful it opened a second tunnel beneath them, leaving the boy teetering above a hole. Now he was certain he never should have taken this mission. He was about to plummet into the abyss. After the fall, the boy survived and, spotting a tunnel in the hole, ventured into it, moving forward blindly. He was relieved to be alive, but clueless about where the path led. If traps awaited, he could hit a dead end. That's exactly what happened. He reached a dead end. Staying vigilant, he struck the wall several times, breaking through. Opening his eyes, he was thrilled to escape the tunnel, but he was stunned to see a massive magical stone in the chamber. He sighed in relief. He'd found the stone slab. He had actually located it. He recalled the instructions for what to do next. It was simple: transcribe the writings on the slab. As he prepared to write, he searched his pockets for a brush and ink, only to realize he'd lost them in the battle. An idea struck him. Lacking ink, he decided to use his own blood, biting his finger to draw it. As he wrote, he pondered which country the script belonged to. Wandering through Chanwo, he'd seen many secret writings, but this was his first encounter with Danascript. Unsure if he'd transcribed the writings correctly, the boy grew curious about the slab's contents. He stepped closer to examine it, hoping to decipher the text. Gripping the slab with his right hand, he accidentally smeared blood from his bleeding finger onto it. A voice suddenly announced that the system was activating. Shocked, the boy didn't grasp what he'd triggered. Fearing another dungeon trap, he decided to flee. He drew his knife to defend himself, but paused, wondering if he'd imagined the sound. It had been unmistakable. The voice spoke again, confirming the system had successfully started and user registration had begun. His voice trembled as he realized he hadn't misheard. Why did the sound seem to echo inside his head? Crouching beside the rock, everything felt surreal. Moments later, the slab exploded. The boy leapt back, exclaiming, "What now?" Opening his eyes wider, he saw a tiger-bodied monster before him. Stunned, he thought, what is this madness? A white tiger? The only entrance was the narrow hole he'd crawled through. Where had this massive tiger come from? Unfriendly, the tiger bared its sharp teeth at him. The boy decided to hell with it. He'd transcribed the symbols from the slab onto paper, so he needed to escape. His sole focus was the hole he'd entered through. But the tiger was swifter, lunging at him. The protagonist couldn't react in time, and took a blow to the head. The impact was so intense it slammed his body against the wall. He felt as if every bone in his body had shattered. He thought he'd die right there in the tunnel, just after completing the mission. Resigning himself to death as the tiger charged, he poured out his soul, lamenting his wretched life and accepting his end. Yet he recalled that he'd once been fortunate, born into the Ha family, one of the 5 great families, enjoying a childhood of wealth and comfort. But as an unwanted child, he lived separated from his family. Despite this, he grew up content. Tragically, when he was barely 12, his mother died, ending his happy days. Left alone, he was summoned back to the family's main estate. From then on, his daily hell began. Born with a frail body, unable to gather internal chi, he couldn't learn martial arts. As a child of the Ha family unable to learn martial arts, he was condemned to live as worthless in that place forever. But one day, after weighing his options, he chose to abandon his family. From then on, he lived as a vagrant. Though a wanderer, he never gave up, fueled by a flicker of hope that his dream of becoming a renowned martial artist across the continent would one day come true. Now, he only wanted to survive, hoping someone would rescue him. His dream of martial artistry had long been buried. He yearned for a chance to live a normal life. But the tiger was closing in to devour him. Suddenly, a voice announced that user registration was complete. He barely registered the sound. He'd be a corpse soon, so it didn't matter. But when he opened his eyes, he was in another realm. A chill enveloped his body, cold and desolate. It felt like he'd plunged into water. Snapping back to awareness, he opened his eyes and realized he was indeed underwater. Reaching land, he was stunned to find himself alive. Glancing around, he couldn't place his surroundings. It felt eerily similar to where he'd lived before leaving for his homeland. The shock didn't end there. Seeing his reflection in the water, he screamed in terror. He looked like he did as a baby. So Chan recalled the last time he played by the river, at 12 years old. A feeling washed over him that he was dreaming. But the voice persisted, suddenly declaring it welcomed So Chan to the martial arts library. Chan jolted in fright, demanding to know who spoke. Peering into the water, he asked if it was the source of the strange sounds from the cave. The voice replied it was the manager of the martial arts library. Chan was clueless about what library it meant. He wondered what library would be by a river. Regardless, he needed to stay cautious. He picked up a rock for protection. He considered it might be a master wielding a martial art from this so-called library. The voice clarified it was nothing like that. Chan was stunned. It had read his thoughts, and he couldn't fathom how. He questioned if any master in this world could read minds. The voice explained it wasn't human. Suddenly, a system materialized before him, taking the form of a girl. The system announced she was the manager of the first floor of the martial arts library, named Waon. Chan, shocked by her appearance, stammered, "Manager Waon?" The system reiterated, introducing herself as Waon, the first floor manager of the martial arts library. Chan asked if he could just call her Ms. Waon. The system replied he could call her whatever he liked, and asked if he now believed it was real. Chan admitted that even if she urged him to believe, having died on the mission and revived as a child, it was hard to accept. On top of that, he was facing a stunning beauty he'd never have dared speak to before his death. He must be dreaming. Waon spoke up, thanking him for the compliment, but insisting this was no dream. Chan realized she'd read his mind again. He couldn't grasp how it was possible. Such a skill eluded even the greatest martial artists. Chan decided to ask Waon if she'd said she was the manager of the martial arts library. She confirmed it. Chan pressed, asking what exactly this martial arts library was. Waon explained it was a library dedicated to collecting and preserving all the world's martial arts. And he, So Chan, had become a user of the library, granting him the right to edit and study its books. Chan was stunned and asked if she meant him. He questioned Waon if there was a mistake. She assured him there wasn't. After all, he contracted with the library by smearing his blood on the stone slab. Chan instantly recalled running his bleeding finger across the slab, leaving a mark. Chan asked where the martial arts library was located, suggesting they go there together. He wanted to see it for himself and understand what it was all about. Waon asked if the master wished to enter the martial arts library. Chan glanced around, searching for an entrance, thinking he was standing in the middle of a stream. He admitted he didn't quite understand what entrenching meant, but confirmed he wanted to go inside. Waon responded that the users will have been verified and entry was granted. Using her powers, she enveloped him in magic. Moments later, Chan opened his eyes and found himself inside the martial arts library. Chan shouted in awe, "This is the martial arts library." Waon welcomed him, inviting him to look around. He asked if all the books were truly there. She confirmed they were all martial arts books, including not only those from Ha-So-Chan's world, but also from various other worlds and dimensions. Chan wandered among the books, marveling at their number. He couldn't believe every book there was about martial arts. To confirm, he picked up a book and noted it was the Namgung Clan Sword Control Manual. He knew it wasn't even recorded in the Great Master's archives, despite learning many techniques through his travels. Where had this come from? Before him lay techniques unknown to his world, the Hanyu family's method for crafting an indestructible wall, and the Shinshim clan's skill-level enhancement method. Chan realized these were core martial arts of the Ha family. Despite lacking internal chi, as a Ha, he'd tortured himself to learn the grueling technique, even though he could never use it. Furious, Chan hurled the books to the ground, shouting that they were worthless trash. Saddened, he lamented that even with these priceless martial arts books before him, he could do nothing but read them. Without internal chi, he couldn't apply the techniques described within. Defeated, Chan slumped to rest. Waon asked if the master was all right. Chan apologized, admitting he'd lost his temper without realizing it. He told himself not to get too upset. He'd lived without internal chi before. He'd already endured the unjust bullying that came with it. Now wasn't the time to wallow. Instead, he needed to consider what to do next and how to handle this library brimming with untold riches. An idea struck him, and he asked Waon if she'd mentioned being the manager of this library earlier. Yin replied that was correct. Chan was serious and asked if she could find a book he wanted to read. Yin replied that she could do it. Does the master wish to use the search function? Chan replied that yes. He would like to use the search function. Let her find him the book he really needs. Yin asked the master what exactly he wanted to set the search criteria. Chan replied for her to find books that contained martial techniques that even people without inner chi could learn. Yin said that she understood everything, and now set up a search according to the user's requirements. Yin looked at all the books she found and found a book with 27 volumes in it. Chan was shocked when he saw this and asked, "Over 1,000 volumes?" He thought he was being made fun of in this way. And is it really true that there are so many martial arts he could learn? And after all, it was a search limited to the first floor only. And only on the first floor alone did so many books come out. And he doesn't know how many floors the library actually has. But something tells him he wouldn't be able to read them even if he spent a lifetime trying. And then Yin said it was time for a second sorting. Let him choose the criterion that came most to his liking. Chan looked at all the criteria presented and chose the art of hand-to-hand combat. He said he understood, and the initial search was a general search, which made the additional criteria unavailable. Also, if he clicked on them like that, they would activate, right? Yin replied that was correct. If he presses it again, he can cancel his choice. And if the gentleman clicks to see detailed information, if he clicks the icon. Also, each book can only contain one of the criteria, so let him choose very carefully. Chan asked, how can they have only one criterion? Yin replied that, for example, this is the case for the same martial arts that can be simultaneously martial arts of hand-to-hand combat, as well as the martial arts of aerial combat. They will be found due to the fact that they have only one distinguishing criterion. And if the gentleman decided to choose both of those criteria at once, he would be thrown back to martial arts. Chan told the system that he understood. And now it comes out, he can find the book he needs if he just sets one of the criteria separately. Also, given the branching options available, it makes perfect sense. It would probably be good to combine this type of combat with weapons. But all he wants is to have internal chi, or at least the power equivalent to having internal chi. and he thinks that's what he should choose. Cha made a choice and said what he chose, and thought, are there realistically going to be books of this type? Yin showed that a search was in progress, and suddenly it showed that the search results were over and 12 books were found. Chang saw this and was pleased. He even said that there was indeed a way to use these techniques without having internal qi. Chan immediately told the system that he wanted to go through all those books and right now. Yin got to work and replied that the user's request had been accepted and she was complying. And now the transfer of the books had already begun. And with my own strength, I put them all right in front of the gentleman. Chan was surprised and said it was the fastest way. Yin answered him that according to the search results, these martial arts books, the most suitable to the user's criteria. And Chan realized that he was seeing such books for the first time in his life. And suddenly a book about an incomparable warrior came to his hand, and it had a rather haughty title. Yin looked at it and said it was a wonderful choice. Chang asked her, she meant, is this book a good choice? Yin replied that yes, of the 12 books obtained from the search. This book is the only one of its kind that has survived in its original form. Chan immediately started studying this book as suddenly a warning came out in front of him that he had little time left to use the martial arts library. Chan didn't like this at all and asked, what the hell is this? And why now? And did he really have almost no time left? Can't he ever come back here again? Yin replied that not at all. After 24 hours, the library will be available again wherever the user is. Chan exhaled and said super. But Yin continued that the martial arts treatises obtained from the library couldn't be read while outside, unless he rented them. Chan asked in surprise, renting? Yin replied that yes, he had. There was only one book available for rent at the moment. The boy was disappointed because it was only one book, and he would have liked to see other works on martial arts, but there was no time left. And Manager Wa-in said that this peerless warrior was good for learning martial arts. But Chan said that he would then take this treatise on the peerless warrior. Yin replied to him that the choice was approved. The system immediately told the gentleman that he had rented a book about an incomparable warrior. The limit of rented books has been exhausted, and the rental period is 1 month. And the time to use the martial arts library has expired. User access has been blocked. Chan opened his eyes and found himself in the river and said he was here again. The shimmering of the stream, the flight of the birds, it was as if everything that had just happened to him had never happened. Chan was scared and started looking for Mrs. Yen, but there was no one there, and he began to wonder what had happened to him. But suddenly, someone shouted to him and called him master. Chan immediately realized it was the familiar voice of Ho Wei. We had been searching for his master all this time, and had finally found him. But Chan realized and knew that we was actually dead. One day, we searched for the master within the city and asked where he had gone. But suddenly, Commander-in-Chief Cho came up to him and asked why he was still here. Wasn't he ordered to escort the convoy going to Secondant? We walked over and replied that he was apologizing. He had a message to deliver to the master. He was just leaving. Cho told the guy that he should think of the honor of the clan first, not this little boy. Have him set out immediately and join the convoy. Wee's situation was not much different from his. Here and there he was engaged in dirty and dangerous work. On one of Chan's horrible days, on the corner of the houses, he was beaten up and tried to kill him. But on that day, a Wee was passing near the house. The bully told him that he trusted this Wee and became just as arrogant. But he knows he's been given a different mission today, so he's a dead man. Chan thought it was all being done to make him angry, and the head of the family knew all about it, but he didn't care. But that night, Chan stayed at the corner of the house and was greatly distressed. And the bully saw him and asked him why he was still here. And he should probably know, so he kindly gives him the news. After all, his protector Wee died on his mission. And it all happened because of him. Because he's weak, because he has no strength. That day he ran like a madman to the murder scene, but he tripped and hit his face in the mud. Opening his eyes and raising his head, he saw in front of him the body of Wee, who was completely covered in arrow holes. And at present, Wee was still alive. Chan ran toward him and hugged his friend. We asked the master what had happened, but Chan was overjoyed and replied that nothing, for at the moment he was still alive. And now he realizes he's actually in the past, and thought it was all the power of the martial arts library. We suddenly said that he thought something not very pleasant had happened to the young master. If so, he brought him some sweets. Chan was surprised and asked his friend if he knew how old he was. We replied that he was 12 years old, right? Chan rejoiced and replied that he sure did. But we told the master that since he wasn't taking it, he could eat it all himself, and took one stick of candy and tried to eat it. But Chan was quicker, and taking the stick of sweets away from him, asked who doesn't take this? We realized that the master loved it all and did it on purpose. Chan believed it was all goodies, and the sweets that Hoey bought him from time to time. He hadn't eaten them since he died, and he thought of we who died because of him. But now it's different. This time he would live a very different life, and he will deal with all those who despise the weak and make the world know who Co. Chan is. In the morning they came home, and Chan remembered that this was his home. And when he was 12, their home was in a small village in Hannam. But if you look closely, the yard isn't cleaned up at all. His mother passed away shortly before they became part of the Hoff family, and if it were possible, he would very much like to go back to that time. We turned to the master and asked if everything was all right. Chan thanked his friend for his concern and replied that he would go first. Let him have a good rest, too. Chan decided to head straight to his room and get some rest. He arrived at his room, where he always spent his time, but thoughts from the past wouldn't let him go. He remembered the moments when he was on the verge of death and Medun, but he started denying it and saying it didn't make any sense. And don't let him think about silly things. But he abruptly stood up and started shouting, "Where should Mrs. Wong go? It wasn't a dream, was it?" But Yin appeared again and answered him that it was not a dream. Chan was frightened and asked where she was. Yin answered him and told him not to panic. She could communicate with the user wherever he was. Chan was surprised and asked if it was like an inner voice. Yin replied that it was sort of like that. There is no distance limitation, and from now on, she would like to keep in contact with the user in this way. Chan sighed and said that he understood now, and he decided to ask how he could make use of the book of the incomparable warrior, but he heard no answer, so he asked that he could not read it. Yin suddenly asked, did he want to read the treatise on the peerless warrior? Chan replied that yes, and right now, if possible. Chan realized that the sooner he studied her, the better, because she said the lease was limited, and since he had never studied anything like this, memorizing it all. Suddenly, Yin appeared and said that the user's intentions were confirmed, and the transfer of information from the peerless warrior. But suddenly, Chan grabbed his head and felt as if he had been electrocuted. He began to ask, what is this? The system said that the peerless warrior had been studied, but Chan didn't understand anything and asked what it was. And just by looking at the cover, he internalized the entire contents of the peerless warrior. Yin also said that the information transfer was complete. Chan became curious and asked, what did she do to him? Yin replied that the full contents of the incomparable warrior treatise had been imported into the user's head. The boy was shocked and asked, the contents of the treatise? He now realized that without any knowledge, he had studied an incomparable warrior. And besides, this treatise tells the exact type of martial arts he was looking for. After this, he decided to meditate, and he wouldn't have thought that behind the peerless warrior was a martial art using innate qi. Unlike ordinary qi energy, which is focused and built up in the abdominal area through the breath, this utilizes the innate qi that all humans possess without exception. And yet, it is a power that should not be used thoughtlessly. After all, if you use up all of your innate qi, you can die. But this is what the author of The Peerless Warrior wrote about. The prejudice that using internal qi will kill them came about because warriors cannot stop the flow of their energy in time. And there's no problem with the normal use of qi energy because they can time stop in. Otherwise, it's like breaking a pitcher to drink water from it. Suddenly, Chan began to feel the strength of the energy flow. And it must be his innate qi. But his body is too weak to utilize his innate qi. Inborn qi is the life force, and to utilize it, he must develop his body. All of a sudden, he felt that the strength of qi seemed to have become greater to him than before. Why was that all of a sudden, he thought? But Yin told him that the martial arts library helped the user in internalizing the knowledge he had gained. Based on the information in the book, he would temporarily gain the abilities needed at the moment. Chan now realized that the martial arts library was truly amazing. And should it affect martial arts training, he thought. But he's a little scared, but this scary thing belongs only to him now. But suddenly he froze and thought a few words. He started shouting to Mrs. Yin and said that it turns out that when the lease expires, the voice in his head will disappear. Yin replied that yes, it would disappear. However, even though the information wouldn't automatically pop up in his head, all the skills acquired through that knowledge wouldn't disappear anywhere. Chan asked if that meant that his martial arts skills wouldn't disappear after the book was returned. Yin replied that he could visualize everything with the example of a situation in which the crops would not disappear just because he took a book on agriculture to read and then gave it back. But Yin's words in Chan's mind wouldn't go away. He now had to fully train before he could get her back, and he wouldn't have a problem. And then the first thing he would have to do was exercise. The next morning outside, the roosters were already crowing and waking up all the people in the house. But we woke up early and went outside and said it was a very fresh morning. And now, before the master wakes up, he has to practice a little. But suddenly he heard strange noises. Looking at the ground, he saw that the master was lying down and asked that we bring him water immediately. We was shocked, and upon hearing his request, immediately brought some. Chan drank some water and began to say that water tasted so good when he was sweating. We found all this strange. He turned to the master. Chan asked him what was wrong. We replied that it was weird to say that, but Chan interrupted him and said that even if it was weird, he had already started saying it. Right? We asked the master if he had eaten something wrong. Chan replied that yes, the sweets he had bought him yesterday were spoiled. We was startled and asked, really? Chan laughed and replied that he was joking and he was fine, and he's going to step back and rest now. We told the master that since he's fine, why is he suddenly like this? After all, he's been around him for 7 years, and he knows him better than anyone. And why suddenly someone who knew nothing and lived only with a brush and a book? Suddenly, he started practicing, even though he had never done so before. Chan replied that he wanted to change. We was surprised and asked, change? In what way? Chan replied that it just seemed to him that he had lived an incomplete life before. For that reason alone, Chan realized in his heart of hearts that living his first life, he had only begun diligent training after he left home. He was despised in the Ha family, but at least he didn't starve. However, he was timid and weak, and outside the family he was incapable of doing anything. One day, he saw some pies and decided to try them. But one of the vendors started shouting that the little one was stealing. And in life, after he left his family, he hated a life where he had to pay for food with beatings. But that day while he was being beaten by the vendor, suddenly someone came up and told him to stop. And he threw a coin on the ground and said he would pay for the pies. And that day, he met his benefactor. He helped him get back on his feet without appealing to his sense of duty. He couldn't practice martial arts because he didn't possess chi energy, so he taught him how to fight and train using only physical strength. Confused by his instructions, he died without having accomplished anything in life. Even though he is young, he is going to live this life differently from the first. Chan told we not to worry. He would start training his body. We was so happy for the master at that moment that he almost cried. And hugging his master said that he was very happy. And what happiness! He is incredibly happy about it. Chan replied that he was happy too, and if Mistress saw the young master now, she would be madly pleased too. Chan went to his room and continued his training by improving his chi, but he still remembered that 3 months were left before he left for his home. It seemed soon, but the time dragged on, and to survive in this terrible place, he must become stronger, and now he's training for his own good. Days, months, and years passed, and one winter day, he was back in the place where he had started. It was the home of the Ha family. Chan remembered that in his previous life, after his mother's death, it was as if he had gone mad. However, this place was not able to comfort his childhood suffering. By the time he is at the entrance gate, that guy should appear near it. Suddenly, he is greeted by the guys and asked if he is Chan. Turning around, he immediately recognized this guy who had been beating him up his entire childhood. And it was the fourth son of the Ha family. Ajino. Chan looked up and said that this was Ha Jin Ho's fourth son. But he remembered that originally there were 3 sons in the family, but with his appearance there were 4. And that's why he was so bullied by him. But Ho went up to him and told him that he was the 3rd son and the boy was the 4th. But Chan told him he was younger than him, so it turns out he's the 4th. Ho asked why he's younger. Chan asked the guy, doesn't he believe him? Is that how old he is? Ho replied that actually, he'll be 12 next year. Chan replied that he's going to turn 12 this year, so he's younger. But Ho wasn't happy and said that just because he was older didn't mean he was his big brother. He's not going to call someone weaker than him an older brother. Chan stood his ground too and replied that since that was the case. Ho got a little curious and asked him, did he think he could win? But rumors reached him that he was a weakling who could do nothing. Ho's guards immediately started laughing at him. But Chan decided that Ho was embarrassing himself right in front of his guards, still as infantile. But Chan said that it turns out that if someone is stronger than him, he will treat him like an older brother. But Ho replied that he also had to be older and called him a jerk. Chan said that in order for him to accept him as his brother, he has to be both stronger and older than him. Ho didn't agree with him and asked the guy what he was trying to say, that he was stronger, and he immediately came at Chan with his fists. But Chan felt Ho try to hit him and immediately moved his head to the side, and the guy missed. Ho was shocked that the 4th son dodged his punch, and Chan noticed that he was still very quick to lose his temper. Ho suddenly said that today he only wanted to say hello to him, but Chan thought it was an impressive greeting. He had imagined the Ha family to be quite influential, and in fact it was different. Ho decided to make himself in charge and told the guy to follow him. Suddenly, they came to the arena where the fights were being held. Ho immediately took in another wooden sword and told Chan to take it. The fans started asking what the heck was that? And isn't this the 3rd son named Chin Ho? But one of the men shouted to them to watch their words, for he is now the 4th. The guy asked with surprise, the 4th son? Wasn't Chin HL the 3rd? The friend replied to him that the man over there just today announced himself as the 3rd son. Ho said stop being so cocky. Chan asked his brother, does he want to spar? Ho is pissed off and replies that he's not sparring. He wants to knock all his confidence out of him. But Chan said that since that's the case, why not spar? And what happens if he wins? Ho laughed and asked him, is he out of his mind? But that's great. If he wins, he'll fulfill his every request. They'll all be witnesses. But if he won, Chan would have to kneel down and even forget about addressing him as an elder. But Chan said that since he was going to win anyway. But Ho got even angrier and started yelling that the guy was just a little shit. And let him not be so cocky just because he was born first. Ho remembered that he had been trained in their family's secret martial arts since he was 5 years old. And everyone was saying that his body was excellent, and he was overtaking all his peers. So don't let Chan dare ignore him. And he threw a few punches. But Chan wasn't intimidated by this at all, and standing still he fended off several of his blows. But Ho didn't stop and shouted that he would pay for his words. Chan still didn't attack him back, and just defended himself against his 4th brother. In a moment, Ho applied the attack and kicked. Ho was shocked that his attacks were all blocked. This little brat was secretly trained in martial arts. But here Chan decided to act on his own, and swung his wooden sword, slashing at his brother. Ho didn't even expect his brother to have grown big enough to fight him. But he got to his feet immediately and decided to take a little break. People said right away that Chan was able to hit the 4th son, and it turns out he's strong. Ho heard the words of the audience and started shouting at Chan. How dare he dishonor him? And using all his techniques, he launched a lightning-fast shadow punch. But Chan was faster than him, and coming close at the moment of his attack, he punched him from his fist right in the face. Ho got up more after that and lay down from hitting his brother so hard. Everyone was surprised and didn't even understand how this could have happened. But the people didn't stay silent for long, and suddenly someone shouted that the 3rd son had won, and he's very cool, and the 4th son is no match for him. Ho came to his senses and, holding his face, said it was painful. But Chan came up and said, did he win? What did Ho say? If he wins, he will grant him any wish he wants? Ho stood up and said he didn't agree, and now they will fight again. Chan didn't care and said he didn't care, but doesn't he think the viewers have already decided the winner? And will he be able to change their minds? And does he think that if they fight again, he will be the one to lose? Chan asked the guy if he would call him Big Brother. Ho saw the look in the guy's eyes and knew he needed to fulfill his promise. After that, we looked for the master and asked where he was, and realized that while he was in the palace going through the settlement procedure, he had gone somewhere, but heard a passerby asking a friend if he had heard already. The guy replied that yes, he was on his way to the arena too, and they talked about the battle of the third and fourth son. When Ui heard these words, he was very worried about the master. Chan told his younger brother to call him Big Brother now, and now he did so in front of all the people. Ho yelled at him to shut his mouth. He has no idea what an embarrassment this is for him. And Chan cheated. Chan asked in surprise, who is cheating here? Ho immediately steeled himself and replied that they were sparring with swords, and he was using his fists. That's against the rules. Chan thought at that moment, didn't his brother kick him first and then refuse to call it sparring? In retrospect, it was easy to realize what an idiot he was. But whether it's pride or something else, he doesn't understand yet. And it will be a total disgrace to leave here and lose to him. Chan thought and said okay, he'd give him another chance to do things by the book. But Ho didn't know what the catch was, but this brat seemed to be secretly learning how to use some sort of inner strength. And then he would fight with the most powerful technique he had, and immediately used a lightning sword strike. Chan felt that the atmosphere was getting hot, and Ho immediately attacked his brother and shouted for him to feel the power. But Chan wasn't even scared after that, and took a step to the side the last moment, and the brother missed his attack. But Chan felt that his brother had become fast and strong. Ho at this moment ran at him with his wooden sword. Chan saw all this and immediately put up his sword for defense. But Ho told him he was surprised early, and quickly moved directly toward his brother. Chan realized that his movements were as natural as the flow of water. He deserved his title as the promising heir of the family. But suddenly he noticed that his brother was too predictable. He doesn't have the agility and ruthlessness he encountered as a wanderer. Ho suddenly shouted to his brother that he was finished. But Chan didn't care, because even though his brother was moving somewhat erratically, he could feel it and could stop him. Just then, Chan used his head rather than his muscles and fell to the ground before attacking, hitting Ho's head directly with his foot. And Chan said they would consider it payment for his kicking. Ho realized that his brother had purposely pretended to fall down to see him off. Chan immediately launched his attack and said that now, as he had requested, he would finish him off with his sword. In making his final attack, he decided to end it all and said there would be no complaints after that. Ho's servants were shocked at this and said that their master had lost, and they ran to him to lift him up and take him to the healer. Taking Ho on their backs, they immediately left the arena and decided to take him to a healer to have him examined. Chan felt relieved at this moment. After all, he had dreamed of defeating this guy all his life. But suddenly, a system appeared in front of him and said that a record of a duel with Ho had been made in the martial arts section. And the record of martial arts was saved in the martial arts library. And this is his first save in the library. As a reward, they'd get an elixir. Chan was excited about his gift, for it was an elixir. He understood that an elixir was a remedy with miraculous properties, something that protects the body and enhances internal energy. However, it is expensive and very sneaky. In his past life, selling the elixir would have provided him with money for months. And then exchanging it for money would be the best solution, but not now. If he could increase his life force with the elixir, then his innate chi would also become more powerful. Suddenly, we came running in and asked the master if he was okay. Chan replied that he had even forgotten that his friend was with him. We began to examine him and asked if the master was injured, and the fourth son didn't hurt him too much, and let him show his hand for the last time. Chan replied that he was uninjured and it was a net gain. We rejoiced and said it was amazing to surpass the fourth son in 3 months. But Chan replied that it wasn't enough. And today he was able to defeat Chin Ho. But what about the first and second son? He thought. And it can't be that the youngest child is the strongest. He has to get even stronger to compete with them. After the arena, he came to the servant who told him he could check into this room. And if he needs anything else, let him ask. Suddenly Chan asked, had no one summoned him? Perhaps a clan elder or the master of the house. The maid replied that she hadn't heard anything about it. Chan said that since she had, she could go now. Chan realized that he had made a mess of the place on the very first day. Nothing had changed since last time. But there was nothing wrong with that. Maybe you should try the elixir, he thought. But Chan decided to turn to Miss Yin and asked if she was here. Yin answered the gentleman that she was, and immediately showed her appearance. Yin asked the gentleman if he wished to receive his elixir. Chan replied that he did. Let him give it to him right now. But suddenly he thought, how did he get his hands on the elixir? And obviously there were some entries in the library's vault. Chan decided to familiarize himself and asked, are there certain conditions for receiving the award? What do you mean the record is saved in the library? Yin asked the gentleman if he wished to know. But suddenly Chan opened his eyes and saw the abyss and was a little frightened. Once in the other sim, Chan asked, where is this? But saw his memories of him fighting his brother and asked him if he wanted to spar. Chan was shocked at what he saw and started screaming in fear that it was him. And why is he seeing himself? Chan was looking at it and saying that's him. And this guy, Jin Ho. And now he realizes that there was a tape recording that captured all his actions. And it's really fragments of their fight. But it's amazing. It's like he's watching a real sparring session right now. But Yin told the Lord that the martial arts library could record and save all the battles the user participated in. And of course, in this way, saved battles can be replayed at any time the user wishes. Sometimes a lightning-fast sword strike. Everything was at this moment like the present and fell to the ground from such an attack. Chan said it was unexpected, but Yin came up and told him that he could feel the experience. But Chan got angry and said she should have warned. And lightning sword strike, if reviewed, it's a worthy battle. In deciding to attack, he thought that he would use his innate chi properly. When he chose the right moment, he immediately struck with his fist. Chan felt the impact felt like it was all happening for real. He wondered what the preservation was for. Yin answered him that it was all about the purpose for which the martial arts library was created. Chan was surprised and asked what was the purpose. Yin replied that the martial arts library was created to collect martial arts records from around the world. After all, the mere existence of books with records of certain techniques does not convey all the details of martial arts. And so in order for the information to be more detailed, it is recorded in a similar way. And now Chan said that he understood everything. And it's not the library helping the user, it's the user providing new entries for the library. Chan asked, so the elixir is a reward for providing a new entry? Yin replied that it was exactly that. However, it will not always be awarded in the future. Right now, it is a commendation for the first entry, but in the future the award will be given at the discretion of the library. Chan asked, what do you mean at the discretion of the library? Yin replied that it means that the award for each individual entry is assigned on a case-by-case basis. For example, if you find and make an entry for a martial art that hasn't been entered into the library yet, you can get a huge reward. And now it was time for her to repay him for that record, and used her powers to give the master the elixir. But suddenly out of the blue, right in the evening, we came to him and was telling the master what it was. Chan wouldn't let him in, and opening the door, asked what was wrong. He told him to go to his room and rest. But we noticed something and asked the master, is it just him, or has his skin color become healthier? Chan pretended to accept the compliments and asked him if he was lying. Earlier, Ing had told the master that it was an elixir prepared from 50-year-old ginseng. Chan realized that of course this orb was inferior to the legendary 1,000-year-old ginseng, but even that was quite rare for shamans or warriors to have. And by eating just a small piece of it, you can get only 1% of its energy. When it comes to internal chi, you can gain strength for 5 years. And it's not easy to increase innate chi reserves, but it helps to expand and strengthen the dantian. Chan asked his friend what happened to come to him at such a time. Suddenly we replied that it was about the third son. But suddenly a guy came behind them and told Chan that he was summoned by the head. The boy was surprised that the head was looking for him and didn't know what had happened. On his way to the chapter, he felt a certain uneasiness. The chapter never cared how he lived his life. At the moment, Ha Mu-run, the head of the Ha clan, he had never considered him as his father. Why now? And now it turned out to be because he had beaten Ho. A servant knocked on the door and said he had brought the third son. Chan thought the head had summoned him just because of that. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he wants to go back, but now is not the time for that. Entering the room, Chan saw the head sitting on the other side of the table and said he greeted the head. Rin told the guy that it had been a long time since they had seen each other. Chan was surprised, for he knew this was their first meeting, and it couldn't be that he still had memories of his past life. Rin told the guy that he saw him when he was just a kid, and he may not remember it. Chan was not surprised and replied that he understood, and in his mind he might have thought he had fatherly feelings for him. But after all, he had left him after their first meeting. Rin asked if he had won the battle with Ho. Chan didn't hide anything from him and replied that he had. But Rin didn't believe it and said that having never studied martial arts, not having chi energy, how did he do it? Chan was shocked at such a question and looked at the head with surprise. But Rin got angry and started yelling at the guy to answer. After all, people said that he had always acted like a coward. But Chan stood his ground and answered the head that there was no such thing. But the servant looked at the lad with an angry face and said that if he lied to the head of the clan, he would pay with his life. Chan replied to the chapter that it was just luck. Hedron asked in surprise, luck? Chang realized that he would have to demonstrate his strength anyway, so there was a need to keep the whole martial arts thing quiet somehow. But Rin didn't believe it and told the guy to stop prevaricating. Chan was surprised and looked at him with incomprehension. After the conversation, Chan left the room and, staring in awake, thought, what was the head up to? If he said luck, wouldn't it be logical to ask what it was? But Hedron was not satisfied with the words of his third child and asked what he thought Mu Qing. Qin replied, what if the chapter is about luck? Rin immediately said what he thought, this is definitely it. And taking the glass in his hands with anger, he smashed it into small pieces. Qin asked, and speaking of luck, is that definitely it? Rin replied that yes, it can't be otherwise. Qin said that he didn't think his daughter-in-law would leave behind such a legacy. In any case, it's amazing that after training for no more than 3 months, this child defeated Ho. Rin asked, what if he'd been trained from the beginning? Qin replied that if that was the case, then everything that had been reported to them had turned out to be a lie. Rin said there was no way to know that for sure. They weren't tracking his every move. But Qin asked, was Chan being helped by someone from his mother's side? But Rin didn't like it and replied to his brother to cut the crap. There's no one else left there. Qin asked if perhaps someone had managed to survive. Rin replied that if that were the case, they would personally come and take the child for themselves. They didn't even know it existed. And if they did, why had they neglected it until now? Qin replied that he had no way of knowing that. Perhaps Chan just didn't want to have anything to do with that place. Rin said it's all behind us now. We need to be more careful. Have Qin bring in additional forces to keep an eye on what's going on around him. Qin used the vaporization technique and replied that it would be done, and flew away like air in the sky. But Rin realized that no matter how you looked at it, it didn't look like this kid was getting outside help. They keep surveillance and know for a fact that no one could have gotten in touch with him. But Chan became stronger without anyone's help. Blood does take its toll. At this time, Chan went to the training ground and began to train. He told himself he had to get stronger. In this place, strength is everything. To survive here, he is not strong enough yet. Chan immediately applied his sword fighting techniques, and after hitting the targets several times, he broke them into small pieces. After that, he suddenly became happy and said that he was finally able to use his power flawlessly, even better that it was innate chi and not acquired. And if you compare, innate chi can show twice as much effect as the same amount of acquired chi. But he can't properly utilize these powers. He has old memories, but the closer he gets to the top, the more systematic and advanced martial arts he needs. Chang decided to approach Yin and said that he wanted to enter the martial arts library. Yin responded that the user's request has been confirmed. The entry to the library was taking place, and immediately moved it into place. Yin showed herself and said she welcomed him to the library. Chan asked if he could use the search function. Yin replied that yes, and asked him what he wanted to find. Chan replied that he wanted a martial art that, like the shamanic ritual of rain attack, combined two martial arts. He realized that he wouldn't be able to study the entire contents of the library, so it would be better to do something highly effective right away. The system immediately said the search was complete, and no martial arts matching the query were found. But Chan was upset because he was sure it existed. But Yin answered him that although it was a martial arts library, it didn't mean that all martial arts were collected here, and the library was revived 100 years later. It is unknown what martial arts were created or transformed during that time. Chan thought, what other martial arts have been missing in the last 100 years? But as far as he knew, the rain attack ritual had appeared long before that. Yin told him that actually the martial arts he needed were in the library. Chan asked with surprise, really? But Yin gave him grief and said he couldn't use them. Chan asked why else. Yin replied that because they're only on the first floor of the library, and what he needs is stored on the third floor. And users who have a contract with a library are divided into 5 classes. From 1 star at the very beginning and up to 5 stars, where the number of stars means how many floors are available to him. Chan asked if he had 1 star now. Yin told him not to worry. He had only recently become a martial arts library user after all. And about another 30% or so of the entire contents of the library are stored on the first floor. Chan asked, all of that is only 30%? And then it turns out the knowledge that will be revealed to him is limitless? Moon replied that Seo Chang is a man with great ambition and a great future. Chan started laughing and said that he wanted to become great. And then, before time runs out, he will make another request. But what must he do to raise his level? Jin replied that it was simple. He has to contribute to the library. Chan was surprised and asked, contribution? Yin replied that they needed to register a new martial art, or like last time, make the first record of something. And that's what happens naturally when he is a library user. And when he's contributed enough, the next floor manager's call will be available to him. And also by passing the trials, he could get a star and increase his level. Chan was surprised and asked, what does a trial mean? Yin decided to demonstrate to him and replied that, for example, something like this. And having made another person, Chang couldn't stand it and fainted. Chan then came to his senses and looking around asked where he was. Yin replied that this was the place where the test would take place. And the test itself is this child. And if he wins it, he can become a 2-star user. Chan was surprised and told her that he was 30 years old and he should be fighting a kid like that. She looked 5 years old, no more. Yin became amused and replied that considering his 12-year-old body, it sounded funny. Then, doesn't he want to try it right now? And if he wins, they'll promote him right away. Chan got excited and replied that that was great. Then we can get started. And the lady could say nothing more. As suddenly, all of a sudden, a child with speed came up to him and looked into the lad's eyes. The child wouldn't talk to him and immediately applied a heavenly spirit strike. Chan didn't even have time to say something before he was hit in the stomach. The force of the blow was so powerful that Chan didn't even stand still and crashed into the wooden stairs. Chan wondered and thought, who was she really? He got a good one, and it hurt a lot, and it would kill him. But looking around, he saw that the child had disappeared. But Yin said that this place is also part of the library. Everything except the one he's renting is an illusion. Chan wondered and asked. Everything he had just experienced was an illusion, and it's getting more and more exhausting. But suddenly Chan saw a foot appear in front of him, and he immediately became wary. And Yin told the master that the trial was still going on. And here he can neither hurt nor die. This child, attacking with the express intention of killing him. Chan asked if it was too much. Yin gave him a surprised look and asked him if he thought it was too much. Chan replied that it was nonsense. Where did he even get such a 5-year period? Yin replied that, well, yeah, she's actually 7 years old. Chan got angry and replied That's not what he meant. He saw that there was definitely distance between them, but she was in front of him in an instant. That attack. And is it really an energy shot, he thought. And an energy shot at this age, that's amazing. The kid immediately got next to him and asked him how much longer he was going to be dumb, and immediately kicked him in the leg, and told him not to look at her any differently just because she was a girl, and used a four-finger punch. The blow was so strong that Chan couldn't even resist it, and fell to the other floor with her. Seeing her palm on his chest, he realized that it didn't really hurt. However, there was no way to dodge or block this technique. Suddenly, he recognized the technique, and said that she called it heaven-breaking magic, didn't she? But the child didn't stop there and extended her arm for another strike. And Chan thought to himself, this child, but this is a child's version of the peerless warrior. And suddenly Chan suggested to her that she stop fighting. And the child heard that and stopped her fist at the last moment. Yin walked up to him and asked, is he really giving up? Chan replied that yes, right now. But Chan wondered if he could try again. If it could not be done in case of failure, Madame would not have sent him here so frivolously. Yin said that's right. If he qualifies, he can try again at any time. And with a snap of her fingers, Yin slapped the child and moved them into the library. Chan realized that he was backing down now, but he would try again and again. He would walk over the heads of those who despised him. And the man who saved him in his past life is a benefactor. He wants to save his life. Chan said he would train hard and one day pass the test she would direct him to. Yin was surprised and replied to the gentleman that he was thinking very optimistically, and that's why she likes him very much. Chan thought it must be sarcasm, but Yin said that unless the master considered his paranoia. The guy didn't waste any time and asked if he could ask for a favor. Yin told him that of course he could. Chan said he would like to get her martial arts recommendation. If there was such a possibility, he needed it to be something related to a peerless warrior. Yin suddenly thought of a recommendation, and she could recommend anything, but finding the book she showed it. Yin said it was something special for him. Chan thought at that moment, how ancient is she? And she was torn in half. But Chan realized that no, this was not the time for doubts. Since Wei Yun was recommending this book, he should believe it. Yin told him that she had encountered resistance, but couldn't help but give him the book. Chang asked with surprise, with resistance? Yin replied that it wasn't like he had anything to worry about. But suddenly Chan thought that maybe this little girl did too. And was it really something to do with dark magic? Then he's totally screwed. Yin told the Lord that he is a high-ranking person, so she can't force him to learn dark magic. And the master can rest assured, it's an authorized martial art. And besides, even if it were, no one would recognize it now. And I guess it's something really old. Chan replied that he thanked her for her help. But Yin said that since the master was so grateful. Suddenly, she decided to change the subject and revealed that she was talking to herself. Ying said that the master would then gain knowledge of this technique and move the information by the lightning strike. Chan didn't expect this and didn't even prepare himself beforehand. But he immediately received a severe pain in his head. But Chan came to his senses and realized that it was no longer as bad as the first time, but it was still unpleasant to feel the knowledge pouring into his head. And suddenly, after seeing all the information, he told the lady that it was such a delightful martial art. But what is it called? Yin replied, the sword point of an incomparable warrior. And it is 150 years old. And this martial art is called the best in the world. Chan was surprised and said it was the best martial art in the world. Suddenly he asked, is what he had in his head really true? Why are there only 3 techniques here? Yin replied that the book had been deliberately divided. Chan was surprised and asked why that was so. Yin replied that the incomparable warrior's sword point was originally stored on the 2nd floor. Chan asked in surprise, on the 2nd floor? Yin replied that yes, that was why she could only give him part of the book. It would help avoid the 2nd floor manager's negative reaction. Chan asked her why she was doing this favor for him. Yin replied that let him just consider it a small gift for the first library user in 100 years. The guy said he was grateful to her. So how can he be repaid for that? Yin melted after saying that and replied that she wished everyone was like him. Again, she pretended to be confused and said she was just remembering a previous user. Chan asked in surprise. The previous user? Yin replied, arrogant and cocky. And he had no manners, and could not do without insults. He was strong and capable, but he was a maverick. But suddenly a strange voice leaked out, and struck by lightning asked Yin, what did she say? Chan was greatly surprised and said, this is what space is. But Yin replied that as soon as she said that, the tiger was right there. Suddenly, a space opened up in front of him, and a person who looked like the head of Ren came out of it, and immediately started snapping at Waon. But Yin was very stern about it, and told him that he couldn't just take the passage like that and open it. And using her strength, she started to close the gate. But the first master tried to hold back and told her not to do it, because it was humiliating, and did not speak to him again and closed the gate completely. But Chan was still surprised and turned to the lady. But Mistress made a joke out of it and said that sometimes it happens. Let her ignore it. Suddenly the system said that the time to use the martial arts library had expired. But Chan didn't want to leave and asked her to wait for a while. But the system disobeyed his order and immediately moved him into real life. Chan looked around and realized that he was back in the same place again, and the broken wooden mannequin was still here. But now he sees that while he is in the library, time stands still. But the man he met in the library, who was it? And why did he seem so familiar? But Chan decided that now was not the time, for the main thing for him was to wield the sword of the incomparable warrior. But he knew that the peerless warrior was the limit of all martial arts. It was a technique with a truly outstanding name. But first of all, one must channel one's internal energy into the sword point. And a peerless warrior's sword point is a battle technique in which one can utilize innate chi. Ono Budo was originally created for the purpose of utilizing innate chi because it is the perfect combination. Suddenly, he decided to use the first technique in the incomparable warrior's sword point, the heavenly distinction of the peerless warrior. But by taking over a certain space, he can repel all incoming attacks. And he also has a second technique, and it's the heavenly pressure of an incomparable warrior. And if enveloping the sword with your inner chi, you can completely crush the opponent. And finally, the last, third technique. Chan placed his sword on the ground and raised it into the sky, forming a small ball. And this is the heaven-piercing technique of an incomparable warrior. Chan had been standing still the entire time, and attacked with his sword simply by raising it as target. The force of the blow was so strong that he used it to make a hole in the wall in the same second. Chan was surprised and said there was no such thing, and it's an energy shot. The guy said that any way you look at it, it's a real energy shot, and he actually managed to do it. But he couldn't believe that he had learned how to use an energy shot after only 3 months of training. It was like he was some kind of genius, and it's probably all thanks to the elixir. But it doesn't matter what he took. Using an energy shot is tricky. Chan was in a fever and decided that he would do it again. And he applied the heaven-piercing incomparable warrior's heavenly piercing. But this time it didn't go the way he planned. The attack didn't work this time, and he was surprised. Chan started waving his sword and shouted, heaven-piercing. All this time he had been trying to make it, but nothing was working. Tired of trying all this, he sat in a corner and thought, how is this possible? He'd already done it, and now why couldn't he do it? And maybe he's not a genius after all. But he thought that if he could use the other techniques, why only the third technique? But suddenly he thought hard about the other techniques. There are 3 kinds of techniques of different power and different range of applications. But what binds them together? And what if the third technique is not used separately? And I decided to imagine that they are all one. But spreading the energy with the first technique, concentrating during the second technique, and with the third technique, this energy shoots out. And now it turns out, the incomparable warrior's sword point is entirely a martial art. Chan used all 2 techniques, and moved to the third, and said that he should be able to do it now. Chan was just starting to apply the third technique, when suddenly, we came in unexpectedly, and turned to the master. We said he was tired of looking for a master, and it had been a long search, and asked him if the meeting with the head went well. But Chan became angry and replied that if we alarmed him over some trifle, as he thought, would he be very angry? We didn't know what to answer and said that he just wanted to meet his master. Chan suddenly understood and asked if there was anyone else here. We replied that yes, and he is here, standing behind him. And it is the incomparable Mr. Ha Myung-woo. Jang suddenly trembled and asked his friend, "Did he say Ha Min-woo?" He immediately remembered that Ha Ming-woo belonged to a side branch of the Ha family that lived in Seishan. But he had no contact with them and knew of them only through rumors from the inns. And what he remembered were the bloody rumors that swirled around their family. And the swordsman Rakshas, that's what they called him, as if he was a cult follower or wielder of dark magic. And because of one sectarian, he lost his younger brother and took the path of revenge. He indiscriminately slaughtered all the sect's followers. They say he was strong and tough enough to be nicknamed the Rakshasas. And now, the swordsman Rakshasas from that rumor stands right in front of him. Seeing this guy's face, he stared and trembled. But Meng turned out to be a boy and said hello to brother So-chan. But Chan was greatly surprised and asked what? We didn't understand what was going on with the master and asked him, "What is it?" Meng also asked the gentleman what he was so surprised about. Chan gave a silly look and replied that it was nothing. And Chan remembered that this guy at this age, he couldn't become a Rakshasa swordsman yet. Chan asked the guy why he was looking for him. Meng replied that speaking of which maybe the gentleman would participate in the opening ceremony. Chan still remembered that the induction ceremony was an irregular event during which children who had already reached their 20s were gathered, but to see if they were worthy of carrying the Ha family name. He failed last time. Chan asked the guy what's in it for him to go there. Meng replied that he had a request. He wants the master to teach him martial arts. Chan was shocked and asked if he was the one who taught it. The next day, the guard asked the ally if he had been listening. The guy asked what about, but the guard didn't hold back and replied that he was about the news about the newly arrived third son. The guy understood and said he was talking about his success. The guard replied that he was, and let him be careful with him. And somehow or another, he had knocked out Mr. Jin Ho. But guy showed him a sign to shut up. But the guard was still babbling and asked him what the incredulous look was all about. They said he was incredibly angry and couldn't even fight back. But when he turned around, he saw that Mr. Ho had heard everything. The master's man immediately grabbed him by the throat and pushed him against the wall. The guy asked the guard how dare he insult the master, and told Ho that these people are just assholes who need to be taught a lesson. But Ho told him to leave them, better hurry to the meeting place. But the boy wanted to teach them a lesson once and for all, and was not satisfied. But Ho couldn't stand the disobedience and turned around to ask him, "Is he deaf?" He told him to speed up. The boy caught up with his master and said he was apologizing, and he didn't want to do that. The boy asked the gentleman if everything was all right, if you don't let the rumors spread. But Ho replied that if the guy beat them, the rumors would only get bigger. And what's more, he really lost. And that asshole Chan, he's willing to admit he's stronger than him. Except he can't win at the opening ceremonies. It'll show him that strength isn't the most important thing. And so the day of the opening ceremony arrived. On this day, the strongest warriors gathered to battle in the arena. Suddenly, Mu Qing came out in front of them and said that he would lead the ceremony. Already soon, they would begin the opening ceremony. Onlookers said that this year's ceremony is bigger than ever. But just how many people are taking part? Someone in the crowd replied that there were 12 people. The spectators started counting and said that one was missing. Chan was already there and looked around, wondering where Meng Wu had disappeared to. After all, they were about to start. Did he need help so badly? If he could afford to be late? That day, Chan said no, and there was no such thing. Meng immediately asked the master if he could help him. If he must repay, just let the master tell him how. Chan replied that he didn't need the payment, and that wasn't the problem. Meng asked what was the problem then. Chan realized he couldn't tell. So he answered the boy that it was all about technique. And the thing is that his martial arts are different from those of the Ha clan. But he doesn't know how to teach them, and even if he could, he wouldn't be able to use them. Meng was disappointed to hear that he couldn't, but he thought he could do it in 3 years of training. He had never been able to defeat Jin Ho. But when he heard that 3 months of training was enough to defeat him, he came to ask Mr. Chan for help. Chan saw that guy crying like that, as if he thought he was a real bad guy. But suddenly he realized that this guy could become a swordsman Rakshasas. And it turns out, he can become a master who can train swordsman Rakshasas. And all of a sudden Chan said, what if they did like this? And suddenly Meng came to the arena and shouted to his brother. Meng asked, hadn't it started yet? Chan asked him immediately why was he so late. The guy replied that the technique he taught him was so interesting. Chan thought about it and told the guy that if he practiced so much, he wouldn't have any difficulties. Meng replied that it was all thanks to his brother's beneficence. Chan said that it was, and let him remember to repay it. Suddenly, Ho arrived at the arena and turned to his brother. When he saw Ha Meng, he asked, is he from Seishan? What are they doing together? Meng replied that it was because Chan was his older brother. Ho started laughing and told the guy why he would call a brother. Chan wouldn't let him say such a thing, and grabbing his ear, told Ho that he should call him Big Brother too. Doesn't he remember his promise? Let him call him Big Brother. Ho was very angry and pounced on him, shouting at him with his fists that he should call him brother. Chan saw that punch coming and decided to dodge right at the last moment and did a backflip. Chan asked his brother, doesn't he want to acknowledge his victory? But so be it. And they're going to fight again now, aren't they? The participants were shocked and asked, will they fight again? And probably the third and fourth son are fighting again. But Ho realized at that moment that there were too many witnesses. Chan told his brother to choose. Will he call him brother? Or will he lose again? But suddenly Chin came out and asked what's the matter? And he hopes that before the ceremony starts, none of the participants will start fighting. Ho was worried and didn't want to be treated to a warning by the referee before he even started. Ho told the manager that was it. And then Chan hugged his brother too and said that they apologize. He and his younger brother Ho are just warming up, miscalculated their strength, and overdid it a bit. Chan looked at his brother and asked, right? Ho decided that to get out of this situation, what anything will do, and said he did, and called Chan his big brother. Chin told the guys to warm up, but not to overdo it. The guys replied that they understood and apologized. Chin decided to act already and said that they would now begin the opening ceremony. But Ho and Chan looked at each other and were very angry. They realized that they would have to fight and decide which of them was stronger. Chin says he will now explain the rules of the ceremony to them. And in fact, the rules are simple. Participants need to collect 2 of these plaques, climb to the top of the mountain, and hand them in. And that's it. And now they will be given 1 plaque each. In addition to that, they need 1 more, which they will get when they go up the mountain. Meng asked the gentleman how to collect these tablets. Chin replied that there are 2 ways. The first is to find the hidden tablets that are scattered all over the mountain. The second, scattered throughout the mountain, are the guardians. After battling them, they will receive the plaques they have. Meng was startled to hear about the guards and a little confused. The contestant asked, is he talking about the strongest fighters of the family? But who would even be able to defeat them? Rin replied that, of course, he wasn't telling them about defeating them. Ho said that in that case, the Lord continued that the contestants should prove their skills to the guards, and they will assess their skills and give them a plaque. The deadline is 4 days. No more rules. If something scary happens, let them yell, and the watchers around them will come to the rescue. Chan realized that, fortunately, it was the same as the first life. In that case, these items will be taken out now. But Chin said that in addition, whoever collected 4 or more plaques would get this. He opened the box and showed that it was a gift from Secondin as a token of their friendship. And if you take them, they will have increased resistance to poisons, as well as increased concentration of internal energy. Ho was immediately surprised and said he had to get them. But Chan realized that he would get them and saw that the real prize was ahead of him. And then Chin said the last prize, the one who collects the most plaques, and showed the box slowly opening it. The participants were shocked, and when they saw it, they said it was glowing, and they feel energized. Chin said it's a rare treasure for a winner. It's Sowandin. The participants were shocked and said that the grand prize was Sowandin, and this year's opening ceremony is really delightful. Chin ordered immediately after the announcement that they could start and wished everyone good luck. The disciples, upon hearing the words of good luck, immediately ran to the mountain where the test would take place. Chan took Meng with him and said they were instructed to go. But Ho abruptly stood in front of them and stopped them. Chan looked at his brother and said, "What a pushy guy, and what does he want?" Ho immediately offered his brother a bet. Chan was surprised and asked what for. The younger one immediately replied that it's about the plaques, and they would bet on who could collect the most wooden tablets. Chan didn't understand what the younger one was trying to say and asked, "Plaques?" Ho replied that whoever collected the most plaques at the end would get the right to be called Big Brother. Chan asked, "What if he doesn't want to? And even if he wins, he gets nothing." Ho has to address him as a senior now. Ho got angry and replied to his brother that he too could pick a prize for winning. Chan was surprised and asked what about his name tag. If he wins, Ho will give it to him. Ho was shocked and asked, "Name tag?" Chan understood that a nameplate was an identification card for grown men, and by giving someone his plaque, he is committing himself to fulfill one request of that person at all costs. In other words, it's an opportunity to use a person once as your slave. Chan told his brother that when he grew up and got a nameplate, he would give it to him. Ho asked his brother how he was going to use it. Chan replied that he could use it any way he wanted. Ho thought about it and realized that a name tag was too much of a risk. Chan asked his brother what's wrong. Having lost once, already afraid to bet? All because he's already thinking about losing? Ho gets angry and replies that he's not the one who's freaking out here. He agrees, and then he gets his brother's plaque too. And if he wins, he gets his plaque too. Also, Chan will publicly admit that his brother is stronger than him. Chan saw the deception and asked why. Why does he have 3 whole conditions? Ho was surprised and asked what he meant. Chan replied that calling Ho an older brother, a plaque, and even a public confession, and if he continued to act like a child now, he would drop the argument. Ho shouted to his brother not to mince words. Why doesn't he put 3 conditions on it? Chan realized in reality that Ho was digging his own grave. So he decided to play his game and said they would do this. And now whoever loses will be obedient to the will of the victor until he reaches Chihak. And after that, there's a passing of the plaque. And how does he like that condition? Ho thought the end result would be absolute submission until he was 15. And now Chan is digging his own grave. Ho said that he agreed, and his brother would have to keep his promise. Chan replied that he should not say so, for the result was already known as it was. Ho didn't listen any further and ran to carry out the mission. Meng was scared and asked his brother if everything was going to be okay. Chan asked, "What's the big deal?" Meng replied that since Brother Ho says things like that, he must be confident. Chan said that, of course, he had probably prepared himself somehow. There should definitely be people here to help Ho. He still remembered that in his previous life, Ho had bribed 2 of his relatives to help him obtain the tablets. Meng suddenly asked, "Isn't this a serious problem for them? Let him not say that brother is going to become Ho's slave." Chan asked Small, "Does he think someone's going to lose here?" Meng replied that there is someone on Ho's side who will help him. Does the brother have people like that too? As expected from a brother. But who are they? Chan pointed his finger and replied that they were him. Meng was surprised and didn't realize that his brother would choose him. But Chan asked him what he was so surprised about. Wasn't he on his side? But anyway, don't let him worry too much, because he'll win for sure. But the way Ho has been preparing hard, he already knows everything. In the past, Ho had mocked him on this day and said that he had once heard that Chan couldn't even collect the plaques. Is he really even more of a loser than they thought? But with just a tiny bit of effort, here's as much as he could gather. And he showed me his plaques. Chan tried to get up and was hurt, but Ho was still taunting him and asked his brother if he wanted to know where all the plaques were. But this is special knowledge, and does the dude want to get it? And speaking of the first plaque, it's a lot more serious than that. Presently, Ho was in the woods and on his knees looking for the plaques. But he had no luck and could not find any. The guys asked Ho, "Is she really supposed to be here?" Ho got angry and told them to shut their mouths and hurry up and find her. Ho realized that things were going very horribly, and this was the second place where the plaque was supposed to be hidden. And then he wondered if his uncle had even done his job. But Chan had gotten there faster and watched his brother agonizingly looking for the signs in the grass. Chan had already done everything and found it, and knew it wasn't there at all, because he knows where they hid their plaques. Headrin at this moment asked if the entrance ceremony went well. Chin replied to the gentleman that yes. Rin immediately decided to remember and said that it had been many years since his relatives had participated in the ceremony. And Jin-ho has a high chance of winning, right? Chin replied that yes, because he was supported by his relatives on his mother's side. Rin asked, what about the incident in the square? But the guards suddenly and unexpectedly attacked the head with their sharp swords and decided to take him by surprise. But Chief Rin was the best at everything and easily knocked the sharp swords out of their hands. And he said he'd heard bad news about him. They said there was a leak. And by the way, Chin didn't screw up the location of the plaques, did he? The boy replied, that of course not. Don't let the leader worry. Everything is under control. But the head said that even if it's not true, Ho will still win. However, Chin asked the head what he thought of Chan. The head didn't immediately answer the question. He decided to go through the guards once more with his sword, slaying them to the ground. Chin said he needed to temper his fervor. But with his character, Jin-ho will surely win. The head replied, that's for sure. And it was also necessary to strengthen the training of the Black Tigers. They were still too weak. At that moment in the forest, Meng was trapped by a big beast that was chasing him and wanted to eat him. And the boy shouted to his brother and called for help. For at this time the plaque was on the neck of this boar and protecting its plaque. Meng remembered that just like his brother said, he had gotten the tablet. Now all that was left was to trap him. Meng picked the perfect moment and shouted to his brother to act now. Have him cut the rope. But Meng saw that nothing was happening and thought that Brother Chan had abandoned him and left him alone. But he turned back and saw that the boar was on its way. And he let out a tear and said he thought so, and shouted that Seo Chan was a liar. But at this moment, Chang heard his words and leaped through the trees with all his speed and used the heavenly pressure of an incomparable warrior against the boar. And with one blow of his sword, he pierced the boar's heart. Meng was very frightened and even cried. Chan asked the guy why he was stopping, but after getting down from the boar, he asked if he had hurt himself. But Min answered nothing, and hugging his brother said that he had saved him and believed in him. But in fact, Chan heard the little man call him a liar. Meng asked his brother where he had been disappearing to. Chan showed the signs and replied that he had found something. Meng was surprised and started yelling that it was 3 whole plaques. And how did the brother do it? Chan hung the plates around his neck and replied that a fool had told him where to find them. Meng walked over to the boar and said the 2 more things he found. And now brother would be able to get himself some magical medicines. And Chan said that as a bonus, they had gotten some meat. And now they could take it to a safe place. And Chan knew the best place he had ever seen in his life, and headed straight for it. Standing in front of the cliff, Meng asked, "Is this the place on top of the cliff?" Chan replied that yes, there's a great cave there. And there he will be safely hidden from other participants and from wild animals. And there's no other place they can find. But Meng replied that they could leave it around here somewhere, right? But Chan said no and told her to think of it as training. But Chan told the younger one that if he came later than him, the boar meat would already run out. Meng immediately shouted that he would come first. Meng slowly approached the rock and began to climb. And Chan looked at him and thought he was a fraud, and thought that he would really become a swordsman Rakshasas. But Chan shouted that this would not do, and he would get there first himself. But before he set off, he felt something strange. He was alarmed by all this and thought, what is this sensation? This isn't a wild animal after all, and now he knows for sure that someone is watching them. At this point he was right, and behind the tree was one of the chapter's men who was a true warrior. Turns out the stalker wasn't alone. There were several other trial participants along with them. The chief ordered one of them to guard the entrance and see that no one came close. 2 of the participants walked into the cave and saw that the boy was already asleep and did not even feel their arrival. Meng at this moment was having his 10th dream and mumbled that that boar was very strong. The boy saw that he was asleep, unsuspecting. The guy in charge came up to him and said he was very well settled. But the other guys saw that there were plaques lying here, and there are 6 more plaques lying on the ground. The main guy gathered them up and said, "How careless they are. Is it really going to end so easily?" But the other guy understood and saw that somehow things were going too easily. But suddenly the guy remembered and asked where the other kid had disappeared to. Chan at that moment went on a varsity hunt and immediately attacked him and tied him up. The guy from the cave asked, "What is that sound?" But Chan stood in front of them and asked, "Are they surprised?" And something he didn't recall him calling out to the guests. The boys asked their man if he was okay. Chan apologized and said this was no place for robbers. The enemy immediately pulled out his sword and attacked Chan, shouting that he was just a coward and telling him to let him go. With a strike, Chan slid to the ground and dodged the boy's attack. And the enemy was shocked that the boy was able to dodge. Chan grabbed the guy's mask and said, "They say thieves are the most cowardly people," and stuck it right into the ground. The other guy was also surprised and yelled at Chan that he was a cocky kid. But in the moment, he got hit on the head and passed out. Meng worked it well and said after the punch that he was a nefarious sign thief. The chief thought that they were supposed to be trapped and were tricked by himself. Or maybe Chong was hiding his chi energy, but how does he have possession of these skills at this age? Chan put his foot on the chest of one of the thieves and asked, "Is he in charge here?" Chan leaned against him and asked where he was from, what province, and could he show his face. The thief shouted at him to stop, but it was too late, and Chan ripped his mask from his face. But he was shocked at what he saw and asked, "Is she a girl?" The girl said that even though she was female, it didn't matter. She immediately struck, but Chan was quicker and dodged it. The girl immediately took advantage of this moment and got off his leg. She realized that Chan was 2 years older than her. And it's certainly not Chin-Ho's level, but seems like his martial arts skills are good. And Chan wondered if it was the same person whose presence he had felt earlier. But it wasn't her. He couldn't have felt that way because of the child. But the girl pounced on him and told him to stop thinking. But Chan didn't think for long and kicked a rock and sent it straight at her head. And after that, Chan decided not to fight her anymore, and taking a rope tied her up. Chan told Meng to gather the others and hang them all together. The girl started screaming and saying he was a coward. But at that moment, there was someone at the bottom watching everything. And the guys didn't waste time and tied them all up and hung them. Meng looked at the faces of the people and was a little surprised. And Chan saw this and asked, "Do these faces look familiar?" Meng replied that yes. "This is the gold, silver, and bronze of the Ha family from Shaanxi." Chan was shocked to hear this. Chang now realized that they are Ha Jiam Ran, Ha Un Ran, and Ha Dong Ran warriors of the Ha family from Shaanxi. Nurse Jiam Ran is called a phoenix. And the two brothers who were outstanding in martial arts were nicknamed the Two-Headed Dragon. Were they fair and good people, he thought? Gentleman Ran started yelling at Meng that he's a cowardly little brat. Tell him to give them his plaques. Chan walked over to her and told her to stop calling him a coward. And if anyone heard that, they'd think he'd stolen them. Mrs. Ran replied that she had searched the foot of the mountain all day and had not found a single plaque. But he acted as if he knew where those plaques were. Chan thought, how could that be? Mrs. Ran asked the guy, did he have any associates at court? He must have used his connections to interfere with the ceremony. And she will tell the host and the head of the clan about his misdeeds. The boys also said they would complain. Chan looked at them as if they were fools and suddenly started laughing unexpectedly. Mrs. Ran asked him what was so funny. Chan replied to them just to give it a try. Having grown up without the support of the clan, he is taking unfair advantage of his position. That would make even the dogs on the estate laugh. The guy said, then it turns out that Chan is only the newly joined third son of the family. Mrs. Ran thought to herself what to do. The third son had gotten the plaque through his efforts. Had they turned into robbers who stole from an innocent person? Chan turned around and said he would come back after the ceremony was over and let them get their act together. Meng asked his brother, is he going to leave like that? Chan replied that he would seize their plaques. After all, if they came to plunder, they should be willing to give back as well. Madame Ran wished at this moment that he wouldn't do this. After all, if this continued, she wouldn't be able to pass the ceremony and become famous as a thief. Mrs. Ran didn't want to do it, but pulled herself together and said that they were apologizing to the third son, and suggested to him that they try it first. Chan immediately smiled and knew they were hooked. Mrs. Ran immediately asked the third son to give them another chance. But the brothers said to their sister that Be that as it may, was she not pleasing him too much? The sister told him to be quiet. If he just left now, it would be the end of them all. Mrs. Rand said he can have the plaques, and in return, let him untie their rope. Chan realized that his plan was to get these three to become his debtors. But should he really let these armed guys go, he thought? Still, he would worry about the consequences afterward. And with all his might, he threw the sign right at them. Mrs. Rand was shocked to see the sign flying straight at her and started screaming. But the sign changed its trajectory and cut the rope. Falling to the ground, Mrs. Rand shouted to her brothers that they were heavy and let them get off her immediately. Chan told them to immediately take their plaques and swords and get out of here. And he even realized that he shouldn't leave his enemies behind him. He told the boys that he would just keep silent about what had happened, and each of them would go his own way. Mrs. Rand rejoiced and thanked her third son for being so helpful. But Chan didn't stop there, and holding out his hand, told them to pay him 50 coins. But Chan understood and knew from experience that nothing in this world is given for free. So he told the boys that 50 coins for 3 plaques. And that's almost free. And so it was the second day of the entrance ceremony. And on top of the mountain at the arrival point were all the main people of the Ha family. Hedren said it was already day 2, and they must have gotten halfway across. Chin replied that yes. They are just now counting the location of the participants and the number of wooden plaques. Chin Ho has collected 3 plaques. These 2 are now halfway to the top, and Jiam Ran, Un Ran, and Dong Ran each collected 1 plaque. They have also already covered half of the climb. The head asked, "Where is So Chong?" The boys replied that they had not yet contacted the observer in charge of him. The head told them that as soon as they contacted him, they should let him know immediately. Suddenly, the head of the Heavenly Warrior Alliance, second brother Ha Mu Ren Ha Mu Chul, suddenly appeared in front of them and said that they had all already gathered. But he was in residence and was told that the climb had already begun. And why is everything going so fast? The guys were surprised and asked if it wasn't Mu Chul. Chul smiled and said they hadn't seen each other for a long time and called them brothers. Ren immediately said hello to his brother. And Chin asked his brother how he got here and called him a heavenly warrior at the end. Chul replied to his brother not to behave like that, because he had brought a special guest. The head was surprised and asked, "Guest?" Immediately, the head of Sekondan, the master elixir maker, appeared in front of them. The master of elixirs said how many years had passed. He even wondered who would get the potions he had prepared. Chin was also shocked and asked the guest how he got here. The elixir master replied that he had stealthily gotten into the place where the passage was closed. That meant that the head of the Ha clan had made a big mistake. Chin replied that he didn't. Immediately, the head stood up and told his brother that it did not matter. He not only helped with the preparation of the elixir, but also personally came here, for which he can only express his gratitude. The master of elixirs accepted his words and said he was glad to hear it. But suddenly a warrior came and apologized to the master and said he had an urgent message, and he asked the head to stop the ceremony immediately. The head was surprised and asked him what he was talking about. The warrior replied that So Chong had already collected 11 of the 20 wooden tablets. The guards think he's cheating. Chin got angry and ordered all the guards to catch him right away. The warrior replied that they had already dispatched the guards, but the 3 guards assigned to him said they were defeated. Chan realized that they had sent guards, and it looked like he was now becoming something of a wooden plaque. The elixir master said with surprise, "Guards, and even 3 people?" and suddenly started laughing and replied that it was a very exciting sight. He's not even going to hide his power. Chin was unhappy with all of this. After all, also these guests had come. It seemed like lawlessness. Chul also supported his brother and laughed. The elixir master said it's not that bad. Rather even good, because such guys can grow up to be very capable, just like their sister. Chin asked with surprise, "How is Big Sister?" The head replied that she was called one of the world's strongest masters, Sishon's best sword. Chul asked, was he the one about the older sister? The elixir master asked him, didn't he know? Chin replied that he knew she was of their kind. The elixir master said he didn't know much about her either. She cut all ties and left the family. The head asked him, Is he saying that Seo-chan can become like her? The Elixir Master replied that he doesn't know. Things can still change before he grows up. But there are still such people, those who survive and become great. And he told the warriors to watch carefully, for they might be watching the formation of a true master. At this moment, Chan was fighting with the warriors who were watching everything, and was even doing very well with them. The warrior was shocked by such power and couldn't believe it. After all, a person who had not attained Shihak could not possess such skills. And it turns out it's true that the 3 guards have been defeated. He can't be wrong at this point. The warrior decided to step aside a bit, and Chan thought he wanted to run away and asked where did he go? What about the signs? The warrior has decided to make an exit plan for himself, and now he will wait for Chan to stop beating him. And Chan was a little smarter and kicked the warrior right in the groin, screaming for a kick in the ass. The warrior was shocked and even let out a tear after such a blow. The warrior was shocked and even let out a tear after such a blow. The warrior told him how dare he use such dirty tricks. Chan asked, what's the big deal? It's better than losing. Chan said that purely on a manly basis he understands his pain, but how about giving him his plaque and stop moaning already? The warrior replied that he could not believe that a child of the ruling party was using such obscene techniques. He would not give him his plaque. Chan said that this is said by a man defeated by such an obscene technique. Has he not felt this efficiency himself? The warrior replied that it was all because of his unfortunate position. There was no way that the guard, with his best efforts, would try again. Chan looked at the warrior and said he told him to try again, putting all his strength into it. Meng was watching everything at this moment and was behind the tree thinking about what his brother was doing. On the contrary, he was provoking the guard. The guard replied to the guy that even if he regretted it, he wouldn't know about it anymore. He immediately vanished from the battlefield. Meng was shocked that the guard had just disappeared. But that was it. The guard had used a decoy and was already attacking from behind. Meng started shouting that it was sudden. So this was the real strength of the guards. He immediately shouted to his brother that the enemy was from above. But Chan didn't even pay attention to him and already knew that the guard was attacking him from behind. The guard decided to go all out and attacked using his most effective technique. But Chan had been waiting for this moment and turned around a bit to use the heavenly distinction Peerless Warrior against him. The guard felt that his sword couldn't move. It was as if something invisible had blocked it. But suddenly in the same second, everything changed and the attack came at him from above. He didn't even realize how that could be. And Chan had already applied the heavenly pressure of the Peerless Warrior at this moment and pinned him straight into the ground. The guard was badly hurt after such a blow and asked what was that. But when he opened his eyes, he saw the point of the sword in front of him. Chan asked, is that it now? Where are his plaques? Here it was, the 3rd day of the induction ceremony. Ho was still on the lookout and was screaming why there was nothing in this place. He knew that somewhere in this cleft there must be a plaque hidden. But why wasn't it here? He knew that the original plan was for him to find the 11 plaques before anyone else and go out to record his victory. But he decided he needed to put more effort into it. He needed to not only get them to join in and help him, but he needed to promise them the elixir as a prize. Because otherwise, when he would fight for the title of heir, the influence of their entire family would be undermined. Suddenly, all of a sudden, Ho saw a piece of wood in front of him and excitedly began to say that it was the 4th plaque. But suddenly, someone right in front of his face grabbed the sign and took it away from Ho. It turned out to be Meng. He immediately said hello to Brother Ho and apologized, but they would keep the plaque. Ho got angry when he saw them and started yelling that it was a sign. Tell them to bring it back immediately. Chan replied that it wasn't even signed, so why would it be his? And Brother Ho remembers their argument, right? Ho realized that he couldn't give him that plaque. He must have it immediately. Ho tried hard and climbed to the top. Chan was surprised and asked his brother, did he climb so fast? Ho replied that it was the first plaque he had been able to find. Don't let your brother talk nonsense. Chan asked him why he was so angry about just one plaque. Wouldn't he be able to find more? I mean, they were hidden all over the mountain. He's got some kind of plan too, right? And he showed his bag of tokens. Ho was shocked to see all the signs in front of him. He couldn't believe it, and he realized that there were more than 10 of them, and he's only got 3 plaques. But he can't beat someone who's already collected half of the 20 plates. So the only thing left for him to do is to take them by force. Ho pulled out his sword and said he was challenging him to a fight, and if he won, he would take all the plaques. Chan looked up and asked. He still didn't understand anything. He had already said he couldn't beat him, and charged his magic fist to strike, leaving a huge bruise on Ho's head. Chan said he had no chance of getting the plaques or winning, and now he's realized that. Also, until he turns 15, he's his slave. And don't forget the name tag. Ho couldn't stand it, and told him to shut his mouth immediately. He would never obey a jerk like him. But Chan punched him again so hard that a second bump appeared and told him he deserved it. Suddenly, Meng told Brother Chan that here it is the top of the mountain, the point of their destination. Chan replied that it was a little early, but that would be the end of their opening ceremony. But suddenly a guy flew in front of him and got hit with enough force to stop a train. After the explosion, Chan wondered what it was. It looked like a man flew past him. But Meng noticed everything and told Brother Chan that a man had just flown by. It's Ran. It's the eldest sister of the 3. But suddenly a man came out of the woods and said that he had miscalculated again and hit too hard. But when he is agitated, he loses control of himself without realizing it. The boys were shocked and didn't realize who he was, for they couldn't see his face because of the shadows. Chang immediately took up his blade and asked who he was and let him show himself immediately. So Chul came out of the woods and told them to be quiet. He's not going to kill him. He just can't believe he just got those plaques for nothing. When Ho saw his uncle, he became like a dandelion and asked him why he was here. And Chan was shocked that his brother said he was the uncle, and the only brother of the head of Mu Qing's family. And then he remembered that there was another one. It was Mu Chul, the 3rd brother who died during the mission. But he died shortly after they met, so he couldn't remember him. It turns out he got to time when he was still alive. Chul says he doesn't think this girl can stand up. He's not going to challenge him like she did, is he? Chan was thinking at this point, what was Chul doing here? And decided to ask him, what kind of challenge is he talking about? Chul replied that, of course, it was about the battle to get his plaques, and suggested to the guy to cheer him up. And if Chan exceeds his expectations, he'll give him all the plaques. Ho asked his uncle, in any quantity? Ho immediately decided to give it a try and told his uncle that he was challenging him to a fight, and immediately attacked him, telling him to watch closely. They call him a born genius for his skill. Ho thought he would take 10 plaques, but So Chan definitely has more plaques than him. But Chul didn't even bother to move away and dodge the attacks. He just grabbed Ho's sword with 2 fingers at the last moment. Chul told the guy that his ego made his mind clouded, and he completely failed to see the strength of his opponent, and let him forget himself and take a wider view of the world. That would be the beginning for him. At that moment, Ho felt that his knife was not moving, but Chul didn't bother with him for long and waved his hand and tossed him aside like a sack of potatoes. Chan turned around and said, how can one be so reckless in such a state? They already have a lot of signs, and told Meng to head upstairs. But Chul used his strength and shouted at the top of his voice that no, and he has no choice after being offered the fight. He placed his palm right on Chan's chest and applied a sound wave, sending him off into the distance. Chan didn't even expect this turn of events, for the force of the blow was so strong that he didn't even have time to see. Meng asked the guy what he was doing. It's not like Chan challenged him. Chul replied that in truth, it was just an excuse. Meng asked what? Chul turns to Chan and says that he's matured so much in such a short time. So much so that he doubts this isn't some kind of trick. And he doesn't think it makes sense, but his father wants to see with his own eyes what he can do. Chan thought over his words to see what he was capable of. At this time, the head was on the cliff watching everything. Chul pulled out his blade and told Chan that if he didn't show them all his skill now, he would be branded a coward for deceiving them. And raising his sword, told his nephew that they were about to begin. He struck hard, but Chan managed to dodge and stepped aside. Chan realized that no matter how rude his father was, Everything had boundaries since he was so curious. He could just ask. And as soon as he increased the distance, Chul was a little surprised and asked, didn't he want to fight him? Chang felt that this technique was too fast. He immediately used his sword to repel his uncle's attack. But the force was considerably high. Chul was surprised too, and said he didn't think his nephew could stop his punch. And Chan realized that as long as his uncle was advancing, he wouldn't be able to keep his distance. He must find a convenient opportunity during the melee. But suddenly the system said that a new martial art had been discovered, and now a recording is on its way. Chul continued to throw his blows and said that he was the one doing it. Where was his strength with which he had defeated the 4 guards? Chan decided that he was tired of defending himself, and it was time to strike back. Immediately after these words, he repelled his uncle's attack. Chul was shocked that the boy had managed to do that, and Chan said he would show him now. However, this was the first time he had used it on a human, and he didn't vouch for the result, and applied his heavenly pressure of the peerless warrior. The force of the punch was also considerably high that Chul couldn't even resist it and roll backwards. But this is the first time he's seen such a technique, and the guy uses the flow of his chi. It's certainly an unusual technique, but Chul fought through the guy's attack and shouted that it was useless in front of a strong opponent. But suddenly he froze for a moment and saw a strange flow of chi, and now Chan was gathering energy at the tip of his sword. Chang said at this moment, his third technique, heaven-piercing, incomparable warrior heavenly technique, released such a strong and huge flow of chi, it swept away everything nearby in its wake. Chan realized that he had only taken a few hits, but his body was completely exhausted, and he almost didn't attack him as expected from the head of the alliance. Zhang said it was all just due to his luck. Chul suddenly came out of the smoke and asked the guy, did he try to kill his uncle? The boy realized that, as he thought, he could not be defeated by such a simple technique. He asked his uncle that he had to prove his innocence, didn't he? Chul replied to his nephew that everything was fine now, and asked what was the technique. How did he use it? Let him do it again. At this moment, Chul was ecstatic at what he saw and couldn't calm down. Chan felt that it was too much for him. His body was exhausted. He couldn't even move. Chan told Uncle that his body is not capable of doing that right now. After the entrance ceremony is over. But Chul replied that it was somewhat difficult. He was already exhausted after all. If he exhausted himself to death, could he take a look at it? Chul decided he wasn't going to leave it at that, and continued to attack. And Chan saw that he couldn't keep up with him in time. And is it possible to be even faster, he thought. Chul at this moment had already raised his blade, and said that if he used this technique again, he would really die. But Chul suddenly saw a moment with his eyes, and suddenly a sword came down right in front of them. Chang asked in surprise, the sword? Suddenly, the elixir master appeared and told Chul to stop, and asked him if he was going to kill his nephew. Chul turned around and was also surprised that the teacher had come in person. Chang didn't realize at this moment. Who was he? And who could Mu Chul call teacher? The elixir master said that when he gets curious, he forgets to watch his backside. His character hasn't changed a bit, and the case seemed serious, so he decided to intervene. And it doesn't look like this kid fooled anyone. It doesn't, does it? And then immediately, he looked at the head and asked again, that's right, isn't it? The head replied that yes, and he thought the master was right. The head also gave his brother a wave and told him to stop. Chul obeyed the order and lowered his sword. The master asked Mr. Ha, how old is this child? The head replied that he was 12 years old. The elixir master recalled that his sister was also unable to fully utilize the energy shot at the age of 12. But what was the true nature of this child? Earlier, the master had looked at the cave at the time of the thieves' attack and saw that Chang had hidden his chi energy and turned this cave into a huge trap. And all this time, he thought, who even at this age? And now they must be more vigilant, for who knows, they may be watching the making of a great warrior. After gathering all the mission participants, the head came out and said that all of them had not had an easy time with this opening ceremony. And with the current results, they announced the results of the ceremony on behalf of the 7th head of the Ha clan. And now the winner was Ha So Chan Meng, immediately started to rejoice at their victory, while the others were just sad and didn't even congratulate them. The elixir master approached the winner and said that he congratulated him. He had demonstrated his skill perfectly. Chan had been thinking all this time, who was this man who had saved him? He thanked and wanted to ask who he was. But the master remembered and replied that he had forgotten to introduce himself and could call him Dan San. Chan, hearing his name, was shocked and remembered that it was the same Dan, San Poison King. This is even crazy. What's the head of their Secondant family doing here? Chan immediately fell on his knee and said that he was honored. San replied that there was no need to bow his head. Wasn't he the main character of today? Chan thanked Head San, but suddenly Head San said he had something he wanted to discuss with him. And Chan will be busy until the evening, but maybe they can have tea after the banquet? Chan rejoiced and replied to the head of Dan that of course he would come, and he would be glad to talk to such a great man. After that, they came into the room, and the servant said that this event was for everyone who was able to make it through the entrance ceremony, and he hoped they would enjoy it. And of course, they continue with the awards. Ihao Meng collected a total of 6 plaques, together with Seo Chan. Meng rejoiced, for he had been able to get the drug from the Dan family. He climbed trees, made rope traps. All the training he thought was useless had paid off. Meng decided to thank Brother Chong, but looking at his seat saw that it was already empty. Chan looked at his award at that moment and said that he now had Sowanden. This is a great rarity for him, after all. And of course the effect should be instantaneous. And that Sowanden, whom he had only watched in his past life, was now his. But suddenly Chul came from behind and asked him, was he so enchanted by him? Chan replied that of course it was Sowanden. Zhang was so scared after Chiol snuck up on him that he even fell off the balcony. Going upstairs, Chul apologized to him and said he didn't expect his nephew to be so freaked out. Chang asked him what he was doing here. Chul replied that he had something to tell him, and also to apologize for what happened at the ceremony. Chul looked and asked, isn't that Sowanden? But Chang suddenly took his hand away and tried to hide it. Chul asked him to let him touch him, but Chan closed his palm and pulled his hand away. Chul started telling him that he was still his uncle. Does he look like someone who would steal from his nephew? Chang replied that it was not just an elixir, but the real Sowanden, and if Chul ran away with it, he wouldn't be able to catch him. Suddenly he realized and said that although, if Chul had used his skills, he must have lost it by now. Chul replied that's exactly what it is. He has a temper, but he doesn't do bad things. And he's sorry he did that at the ceremony. He just got too caught up in the excitement. Chang has seen that Chul is a strong martial artist, but his intelligence seems to be lacking. Doesn't he feel more like a friend than an uncle? Suddenly, Chul said, speaking of his skills, he was just here to talk about them. His technique is called the Step of the Heavenly Thunder God, and he wants to pass it on to him. Chan was surprised and asked, is his uncle passing the Step of the Heavenly Thunder God to him? Chul replied that it was also a first for him. The Step of the Heavenly Thunder God was created by him and had not yet been inherited by anyone. Chan asked, but why him? There must be talented people in the alliance too, right? Chul said because this was the first time something like this had happened. The Step of the Heavenly Thunder God was able to block someone his age. And that's not all. He didn't panic and was always looking for an opportunity to counterattack. It was like he was a battle-hardened, 30-year-old mercenary. Chan replied, what nonsense. He would be happy to learn the move of the Heavenly Thunder God as soon as possible. Chul said, of course. But before that, he should eat Sowanden as soon as possible. Who knows, maybe someone will really want to steal it. Upon arriving in the room, Chul said that until he completely absorbed Sowanden's power, he would protect him. Chan sat down right in the middle of the room and said then they would proceed. He remembered that Sowanden, who possessed incredible strength, was worthy of him. In his past life, he was sat down by Hak Jin-ho and nothing bad happened. Chan opened his mouth and ate that balloon. The power of this ball immediately seeped into every cell of Chan's body and even reached the blood vessels. Chul saw his nephew and was worried about him. At that moment, Zhang started shouting that he was on fire. He immediately felt that he had received too much qi. It felt like his body was about to burn. Chul told his nephew that the chi energy was too powerful. Have him spit it out now before it's too late. Chan realized that he had worked so hard to get it. How could he just pick it up and spit it out? And suddenly appeared and told him that everything was right. It's a waste of energy to throw it away. So she decided to help him a little. She opened a barrier in front of him, and the system said there would be a conservation of excess energy in the library. Chan immediately felt the energy being drawn out of him, and he even felt a little chilly. The energy was stabilizing, and the reserve of inner strength was being replenished. Yin said that she had stored all the excess energy in the library. When the resource becomes available, he will be able to borrow it again. Chang listened to Mrs. Yin and thanked her for being so helpful. Shul asked, the energy that suddenly stabilized, is he okay? Chan said yes, and it was as if he had twice as much strength. As he stood up, he took one step and felt his foot fall off. The people heard it too and asked what was that noise. The boy answered him that it was from the third son's chamber. The guys immediately came to the room and asked the gentleman, is he all right? Chul was laughing at that moment at what had happened, and he said that So Wandan's magical properties could do many things. After all, he broke the roof of the house with his head. Chan got sick of it all and started yelling at them to stop laughing and get him out of here. Chang asked his uncle if he would pass on the knowledge here. Chul replied that yes, the techniques should be taught in the training room. There's also no ceiling and nothing to bang your head against. Chan told him to stop talking about that already. Chul says before they start, he has a question. What does he think about the step of the heavenly thunder god? Chan responded that the practical application of knowledge allows for incredibly fast movement. Chul asked, that was only part of the answer, wasn't it? If it was just about speed, he would have called it something else. Chul picked up a small stone from the floor, and by letting his power flow through it, he made the stone start to sparkle and move faster. Chul said a martial art with infinite acceleration. This is the heavenly god of thunder, and it has both advantages and disadvantages. If you keep accelerating, this will happen. And he showed how the stone jumped out of his palm with great speed. Chul told the guy that when he speeds up, at one point he might stop controlling himself. This is true even for him, who created the technique. If you get caught up in the excitement of speed, it's over. Let him mean it. Chan replied that yes. He understood. Chul got excited and said they could start with the basics, and let him repeat the movements they show him. Through the unity of heaven, earth, and man, the step of the heavenly god of thunder takes its foundation in the smooth flow of chi energy. Let him not control himself with the power of his mind. Just let his body act on its own. Chiol saw that Chang was absorbing the new knowledge like a sponge. That's what it's like to have a student. And if Chang still owned Dantian, no, even if they had met a few months ago, the difference would be enormous. Chiol showed everything and said that this is the basic principle in technology. Does the nephew understand? Chan replied yes. He understood everything. Chul looked and told the student that he was a very fast learner. And now, let him try it on his own. After all, he will check in and check on his progress. He has ability, so if he works hard, ideally in a year or so. But unexpectedly, Chiol saw the energy around Chan that he himself had felt during his training appeared. At that moment, the system showed that the study of the celestial thunder god's pitch was 60%. Chan asked, should it get something like this? Chiol was shocked and thought how he had only a moment ago started learning the technique. Chang jumped into the sky like a true and trained warrior in that second. Chan immediately realized that he could use the heavenly god of thunder's move. And he succeeded. After an hour of training, Chiol was already shouting that Chan was doing well, and let him try to feel the chi energy with his body, and a tingling sensation. Does his nephew understand what he is telling him? Chan smiled and replied that yes, but he didn't really understand anything. And Chiol understands at this moment a sense of satisfaction. After all, he didn't even explain anything, and the guy understood everything. Firstly, the Heavenly Thunder God step is based on their family's thunder sword technique. They said that he was unreasonable, but suddenly opening his eyes, he was shocked and heard Yin telling him that he wasn't. Chan asked, is this a library? And how did he suddenly end up here? Yin replied, letting the master accept her congratulations. It was the first time he had registered a new martial art. CNA asked in surprise, had he registered a martial art? Suddenly, a book appeared in front of him. Chang asked, is this book about the step of the heavenly thunder god? Un replied that this martial art is unique. It was created by Mu Chul, and he was given the first entry in the library about him. Chang was surprised and asked him, but he's a little embarrassed now. But what if he didn't understand anything his uncle taught him? Un replied that he didn't need to understand. Seo Chang is the eyes and ears of the library. What he sees, the library sees. What he hears, the library hears. And with the martial arts base accumulated in the library, he can quickly absorb new information. And in other words, when she says the library is learning, she means they're learning together. Chan looked over and saw the people who had run the library before. Yin told him that he remembered that he could borrow martial arts from the library and study them, right? Chan got excited and replied that of course. And right now, he would like to rent the step of the heavenly thunder god. Just then, the system said that the step of the heavenly thunder god had been registered. And after that, it became rented. And the gentleman had contributed enough and could challenge the library manager. Arriving in the present world, Chang asked, should something like this work out? At this moment, Ing also sighed and said that he had finally left. Now he had both made his first contribution and gained strength considerably. And they would meet soon, and she would have to work hard to make him realize his situation. The child replied that she understood. Chan suddenly demonstrated the entire technique and asked his uncle how he felt. His step of the heavenly god of thunder. Chul couldn't help himself and started laughing very loudly. Zhang was shocked and didn't understand why his uncle was laughing. Chul put his arm around his shoulders and asked if he realized what he had just done. He had spent over a decade developing the pitch of the heavenly thunder god, and he just took 10 minutes to learn the whole thing. Not even a genius could do that. Chan realized that this was the point. What he had just shown his uncle, he had shown him too rapid progress, and no wonder Chul doubted him. Chul suddenly decided to ask Chan, did he happen to want to join their alliance? Chan was already at this point thinking about what excuse he could come up with. But after his question, he was surprised. Chul told him that there was nothing to consider. Just let him come to them. He would take full responsibility and support him. Chang was surprised and replied that he was 12 years old. What alliance? Chul said he would initiate him into the Taknas of the clan. And an elixir. That's right. He'll give him the elixir. Chan realized that it was the same as during the ceremony. His eyes sparkled. If he joins the alliance now, without hesitation, there will be restrictions placed on his actions. However, if he rejects it, as he did last time, he may grab a gun. But suddenly Sang came in and told Chul to stop. And could he share his thoughts with his talented nephew? Chul replied to the teacher that it was not coercion. Sen asked him if his uncle grabbed him and was advancing. Would he be able to refuse? Chiol thought for a moment and replied that he was asking Chan for forgiveness. He had lost control again. Chan replied, no big deal. He thinks his uncle just praised his abilities. Sang tells his nephew that he's much more empathetic than Chul, and he likes it. And could they have tea now, as they had agreed in the afternoon? Chan replied to Head Dan that it was presumptuous of him, but did he really want to have tea with him? And if he has something to say, could you do it right now? Chul was surprised and asked Chan what he was carrying. Sen stepped into the conversation and said it was okay. Saying ridiculous things is childish privilege. So he's not going to beat around the bush. And then Sen asked Chan directly if they wanted to get engaged. Chan was shocked after hearing him say that and thought that Head Dan had asked him to get engaged. The next day, Meng found out about it and was saying that being engaged to a lady from the Dan family was delightful. Chan replied that this was nonsense and asked if it was so amazing. Meng came down from the tree and set a course. After all, this engagement was proposed to him by the Poison King Dan, San himself. Or to put it another way, he will be betrothed to a direct heiress of the family. And if the heiresses are their age, Zhang told Junior that there was no one there but Dan S.E.Ren. Meng replied to his brother that he hadn't even been to Seishan, so how would he know? Chan pretended to be stupid and replied that he had only heard the name, and that was it. Meng said that she must be pretty famous since she is Princess Dan. In fact, not only did he know her name, but he had seen her with his own eyes. But is it possible to forget the venomous royal dragon Dan Se Run? In a moment, he remembered this day when he fought his opponents and realized it was a bloody war. And in the war against the demonic cult that would happen 10 years later, he participated as a mercenary invited by the Alliance. Suddenly, the Poison Clan warriors swooped down on them, screaming at them to all die. And these were mercenaries hired by the pariah. But Chan was very angry that day, and by setting his sword up, he repelled the Poison Clan's attack. But he didn't finish anything at this point. Waving his sword, he slashed the belly of the Poison Clan warrior. Suddenly, one of the warriors shouted that they were pushing the front line, and the Alliance guys are wounded. They should get out too. But Chan called him a fool and asked him how he thought they should retreat further. Suddenly, 3 warriors who were holding their swords and shouting for him to die came at him from behind. Chan felt them and realized he was in the shit. But in the mines in front of him, a demonic wave appeared and enveloped the Poison Clan warriors. In that day, he met Dan Se Rin. The girl looked at Chan and told him to return to the ranks. After all, the Heavenly Warrior Alliance mercenaries. Poison Dragon of the Celestial Sky. When the poisonous dragon was released, the warriors were all frightened and ran away asking what the hell was that. But the leader told them to run away. But one of them didn't escape in time and got trapped by Ms. Run. He was screaming for his brothers to get him out. Chan's team looked at all of this and were shocked at what had happened. After all, he didn't know she was that strong. When he saw the dead body of the warrior, he was surprised to see that there was nothing left of him but a skeleton. He thought, is he all gone? Rin said it was time for them to move on to the next zone, and they, from now on, would deal with those who had escaped her attacks. And all those asshole sect members, repulsive. Chan realized that of all living things, she was both more beautiful and scarier than anyone. Meng suddenly spoke up and said that he had heard it said that all the ladies of the Dan family were delightful. He was directly envious of his brother. But Chan told the little man that he should not. After all, he had given up the engagement. At that time, he told San that he asked his pardon, but he had to refuse him. San was surprised at his answer and asked if he could find out the reason. Maybe there is someone among his daughters who is not sympathetic to him. Chan replied that he didn't. It's just that the whole point is that his top priority right now is to become a strong martial artist. Sin said that then, by agreeing to the engagement, he would also get the support of their entire clan, and at the same time, he could become a strong fighter. But Chan replied that by gaining his power this way, would he still be Ha-So Chan, or just a pawn of the Poison King? But suddenly, Chul entered the conversation and said that they needed to cool down a bit. Sang looked at him and said that was ridiculous. But Chan asked the head, didn't he say that was the privilege of children? Ridiculous. Sin suddenly replied that he had lost. He never thought he would get his heart broken at that age. But then how about when he turns 15, he comes to Soxin at least once? It's not that hard. What? Chana won't be able to do it? Jang realized that he was still planning to go to Seishin when he reached the age of 15. He accepted the offer, but now he had things to focus on. As a reward, the record of the Celestial Thunder Gods gave him the necessary input. Chan told Meng that he was going to take a little walk. Meng became curious and asked where to. Chan replied that he needed to get revenge on a little girl. Suddenly, the system received a notification and said that the user was being checked in and logged into the library. Chan turned to the manager and asked where she was. He had come to challenge her. Yin suddenly appeared and asked the gentleman, is he here already? Did he come to lose to Ha-So Chan again? The girl said that this time she would make him beg for mercy again. But Chan said no way, he could get around her now. Yin answered him that he should use the point of the Peerless Warrior's sword she had given him. After her words, a sword appeared in front of Chan, and Yin said that it was created by the powers of the library. It wouldn't break or split. Chan looked at her and realized she was strong, for even now he could see no vulnerabilities. However, he too had changed. He received the sword point of the Peerless Warrior, the step of the Heavenly Thunder God, and the elixir. Yin approached the master and said they would check on him again. Would he challenge the library manager? Chan got excited and replied that of course he did. He challenges her to a duel. The girl told the kid that she wouldn't let him defy her again. Chan realized that if his speculation was correct, then this kid is the record of the heavenly demon left in the library. He has no idea how she ended up in the library, but it's tense. He has to keep in his head that he's dealing with a celestial demon, and there would never be a need to avert his eyes. But suddenly the girl vaporized in front of him, and he was greatly surprised that he even asked where she had gone. The girl was already behind him and asked him what he was doing. Chang heard her voice and was immediately alert. The girl didn't want to continue this fight and used the air-ripping heavenly demon. After the explosion, the girl looked at him and said he dared to defy her. But looking beneath her, she was shocked and didn't understand how this could have happened. "Where did that asshole go?" she asked. Chan was already behind her at this point and was using his newly obtained technique. Chan headed towards her and asked her how she talks to adults. He'd be a total loser if he got it from her. The guy waved his sword and shouted that he had used the peerless attack she should get. But the girl was not confused and kicked her foot and said that she had applied the heavenly demon overwhelming step. But Chan was a little shocked by her technique, that there was a shell above them that was about to explode. Yin looked at them and seeing the explosion said that fireworks, is that what she thought it was? The girl asked her opponent, did he not falter? Was it really his unique instant blocking ability? But if the guy decided to act like that, is he really all dead? Let him get up and fight for real, if he's not a coward. Chan realized that if it wasn't for the Bibliotheca, he would have been destroyed by now. What kind of technique did she have, he thought? But all of a sudden, Yin came over and slammed her fist on the girl's head and asked her what she was doing. They're on a trial. The girl asked the mistress why she was climbing. Yin replied that it was after all a divine, sacred fire attack. She secretly studied the library. Chan heard everything and thought of the divine, sacred fire attack as well. And could it really be a technique of the Sacred Fire School? And from the Sacred Fire School, two techniques were secretly passed down. One of them symbolized the power of the heavenly demon, is the heavenly demon divine attack. The other, however, referred to their fanatical devotion to fire, this divine attack of sacred fire. And it was also said that to become the head of the Sacred Fire School, one needed to possess both of them. And even the head of the Sacred Fire School possessing the power of a heavenly demon, two of these powers, was showing its true colors by combining them. This technique was so powerful that once it was used, one could lose everything in front of them. And the flame burning the sky was the heavenly demon of the Sacred Fire School. She was able to combine the two techniques in this child's body. But what era is this little celestial demon from, he thought. And now it turns out the celestial demon left his memories in the library. But in a moment he realized that these two were very much alike, and were they really two elements of this technique? The next morning Chin was greatly surprised and went to the head. But the head immediately told him to call Chul now. Looking at the message, he asked what was going on in the alliance. After all, this is a very unexpected message for them. At this moment, Ying told the girl that she would confiscate the divine, sacred fire attack anyway, and pulled it out of the child's body. The girl screamed at her to bring her back. And what's wrong with a follower of the sacred fire craving a flame? Yin replied that those were powers that a 7-year-old shouldn't have. Zhang asked, what about the current manager Wai Yong? Heavenly Demon Divine Attack and Heavenly Demon Sacred Fire. Couldn't they use both martial arts? And if his thoughts are right now, Lady Wai Yun, but or could she still call herself a heavenly demon? Yin replied to the gentleman that he was observant. But let this be a chance for him to remember one important thing. Isn't he now trying to question the woman about her past? But Chan asked, why would she even want a younger alter ego? Why not come out against him directly? Yin replied that because if she came out against him, she couldn't fight him even as a joke. Chan was shocked to hear her words and fell silent. Un, on the other hand, said that she had said something too much, and now they can already continue the challenge. But will Chan be able to defeat the child version of her? Chan didn't run away and took her words seriously. He immediately began to fight her to the death. The girl used her technique, and in the moment of her attack, she shouted to the gentleman to eat this from her. But Chan looked at her and did the smart thing. He applied the heavenly distinction of an incomparable warrior. The girl was surprised and asked, "The tip of the peerless warrior's sword?" But Chan immediately raised his sword and applied the heavenly pressure of an incomparable warrior. The girl dodged them and told him he was still too clumsy. That way he couldn't beat her. Chan was shocked and replied that even after such blows, her voice didn't waver, and decided to apply heaven-piercing and filled the shell in front of his face to send it straight into her. But he saw that she came very close to him and used the peerless warrior. But the girl was smarter than him and shattered his attack with a kick. Chan asked her how she was able to dodge, but suddenly he saw that he couldn't see her in front of him, and in a moment he got hit right in the head. After the big bang, she asked him, "Is that it?" He was learning both, and she looked forward to it, but he's so weak. And now she noticed that nothing had changed since he first came to the library. Chan was shocked to hear that he hadn't changed. The girl clenched her fist and asked the guy, was he the one who called her a little kid? And now it was her turn again. Raising her fist to the sky, she told him not to even move and stand still. He had been watching the lords battle the entire time and didn't even want to get involved in the whole thing. But suddenly the past owner of the library showed up and told her to be lenient. Like if she doesn't say anything to him and just keeps beating him up, he'll figure it out on his own. And she's what, backing off? Yin asked him if he was dissatisfied. The man replied that he was not at all, because the trial depended entirely on the wishes of the manager. And he's just wondering right now if he can do it right, because the first floor test is really hard. He didn't change himself. The only thing that increased was his strength thanks to the library. Only when he realized this could he take the true power of the library and grow. And realizing your powerlessness and admitting defeat is the goal of the first floor test. However, this guy was so weak before he entered the library. Would it be difficult for him to let go of his strong self? And why was she still so nice to him? And didn't that crazy man just hit her now? Yin replied that it's all because Chan is handsome and kind to her. Unlike him, the man didn't expect it and asked why. Compared to these guys, he's a choker. Yin wouldn't listen to him and told him to stop before she made him shut up. And of course, that's not the only reason. All of the stewards came to the library as strong warriors. They had to pass her test with memories overwhelming them with power. And he's not interested? In the heat of battle, Chan asked, what decision would the library make regarding someone who was certain of his helplessness? The girl replied that even in the testing arena, internal chi is not infinite. And if he continued like this, he wouldn't survive. Chan realized, too, that he couldn't run away without end. He had to speed up and strike. Chan gained the very speed for his attack, but suddenly she appeared in front of him and said that he had opened up, and raising her foot above his head, she applied one of her moves. And Chan couldn't dodge and fell to the ground. But suddenly the girl was surprised and asked, "Is there more to come?" Chan realized that he had been overconfident, had overdone his speed, and couldn't control himself. And now it's a disgrace to him. Like the young mistress said, he doesn't have enough of his own powers. He can't even properly use the gifts the library has given him. However, he won't give up. He will fight to the end. And using his strength, he went on the attack. The girl said, using the power she had gotten her hands on, make it about running already. But she didn't leave him a chance to strike, as she slammed into him with both feet and asked, is he out of his mind? But Chan resisted her blow and replied that the sword point of an incomparable warrior is a great martial art. After all he has to do is gather energy. The man was shocked at what he saw and thought that this kid could really do it. And then Chang said that there is plenty of chi energy here. This energy will spread like lightning. He immediately applied his thunderous piercing of the peerless warrior and launched that very shell right into her. The man immediately upon seeing this realized that the boy had combined two martial arts into one. Chan released the entire tank of his chi, and at the moment of impact, he disabled it. But seeing this, he was happy that he had finally succeeded in striking. But there was very little residual chi left in his body, and felt his eyes begin to close. And with that, he fell to the ground. Yin realized that he had won the trial aimed at defeat, and at the same time, he recognized his helplessness. And the man realized that he had combined the sword point of an incomparable warrior with a technique completely polar to him. And now he saw what an interesting kid they got. And he said he thought Chan wasn't a complete idiot. Yin was surprised and told him that they were going to fight about it now. But the man decided to leave already. And lastly, he told her to finish everything and come to his place on the second floor. Yin said that although he liked it, he still remains grumpy. At this moment, Chang raised his hand and said that he used too much internal qi, and now he can't move. And could she not help him? The girl immediately held out her hand to him and said that she must have thought badly of him, and she thought he had no powers, so she didn't think things could change so much towards the end. The girl immediately apologized to him, but Chan replied that it was no big deal, and on the contrary, he was grateful to her too. And now, thanks to her, he looked at himself differently. He realized he could do better, and it provoked him. But Chan couldn't help himself and hit her on the head with his fist. The girl asked him what he was doing. They had such a warm farewell atmosphere. Chan apologized and replied that he was angry and didn't know. But suddenly he saw her disappear and told her. The girl replied that she was just a copy for testing. After all, it was time to return to her body. Chan wondered if she would completely disappear. But lastly, the girl put her hand on his chest and said she noticed his vulnerability. It was revenge. Pushing him to the ground, she said she would see him again. She would continue to support him from here on out, and let him not let himself be deceived. Entering her body, Yin walked up to the guy and looked at him. Suddenly, Chan told Mrs. Yin that she was a bully. Yin laughed and replied that she had grown up in the wilderness, embarrassed even to her heart's content. But she decided to cut to the chase and said she was on record saying that Chan had passed the first floor manager's test. The system immediately jumped out and shouted to the guy that she congratulated him. He had passed a martial arts library's first floor manager's test. And now begins the level up of User Chan. The guy closed his eyes in a moment and began to feel his strength grow in the blink of an eye. But after all that, he opened his eyes and saw that he was in the planet's atmosphere. Chan asked in surprise, "Is this space?" But the system replied that a user-level check was in progress. Suddenly, a shell of fire appeared near him. He immediately noticed it and saw the fire spread through the space. And now, a mystical space in which 6 energies arose. And Seo Chang felt them. If one follows their light, one can reach the desired level. However, he was already feeling it. He realized that he didn't have enough skills yet. All of a sudden, the system said that the promotion check is complete. And Ha Seo Jiang's rating has been changed, and went up 2 stars, and went to the second level of the library. Opening his eyes, Chan was shocked and said that this was the second floor of the library. Yin replied that yes, it wasn't much different from the first floor. However, he would now, of course, be able to learn many more martial arts. And also new library functions will be revealed to him. When Chan heard about the new features, he started to get excited. He immediately asked, "What are they?" But suddenly heard back from another person who said it was excellent. He had a lot of questions for him. Chan was shocked to see him because this man was big, and he had seen this man somewhere before. And he suddenly remembered that it was a man who suddenly tore up the space on the first floor. Chan said, "What do you get? The man is the manager of the second floor?" The man answered the guy, and he's not completely blind. Chan said hello and said it was nice to meet the manager. The man replied that he didn't have to. He doesn't like any show-offs. Chan suddenly felt that this person was very strong. He didn't feel at all like Ms. Waun, but his strength could definitely be felt. The man couldn't help himself, and slapping his big palm on the guy's back, said he was fumbling. Chan thought, why did the explosion sound? And collapsed to the ground like a sack of potatoes. Un was frightened and immediately ran up to him. Chan thought, what kind of power is this? Could he be in pain while in a library? Yin got mad at the man and yelled that he said he didn't like being bowed down to. The man replied that it's very noisy, and the guy loses his balance too easily. And then he hugged the boy and said there was nothing to worry about. From now on, he would train his stunted body hard. Chan asked the man, is he saying this as the second floor manager? The man replied that exactly. He just let him wait. Chan says that then it turns out the first floor manager Yin will go bad and they won't be able to see each other anymore? Hearing such a question, Yin herself almost cried and became very sad, for the Lord was right. Yin asked the gentleman, "Is he worried that he won't see her again?" and smiled and said that it was very nice. Chan was surprised and replied that he wasn't, but Yin was already happy and told him not to worry. He would be able to visit the floors he had already discovered in peace. Chan sighed and said that was good and called her the manageress. And the man asked if he knew how old she was to address her like that. Despite her appearance, she was already over 100 years old. But Un couldn't stand it and punched him as hard as she could. Chan saw this and was afraid for the administrator. After all, he was already lying on the ground, unconscious. Chan thought that being in the same room with such a person, Manager Yin, is also a scary person. Yin suddenly smiled and asked Chan what he was thinking about right now. Chan replied that it was nothing like that, but Yin told him that she would always support him. If he needs help, he can ask for it any time. Yin had already decided to leave for the first floor and immediately vanished. Chan was very grateful to her in his heart. The man came to his senses at this point and spoke in pain, as if Yin wasn't a sectarian. That nasty character of hers is horrible. The man squatted down and said that he could now formally introduce himself, and his name is the Incomparable. He's the manager of the second floor of the library. Chan was surprised and said that if the Peerless One was called that, the Peerless Warrior's sword point was created by him. The Incomparable One replied that that was exactly the case. He is the one who created the sword point of the Peerless Warrior. Chan thought it was marvelous to think of the creator of the Incomparable Warrior's sword point controlling. Incomparable said that it shouldn't be too much of a surprise. If the guy went higher, he would find martial arts created by the rest of the library managers. Chan immediately noticed that Madame Wan's technique was there as well. Would he really be able to become a powerhouse? Incomparable read everything in his head and asked the guy, "Is he that insatiable?" Chan replied that he was. Chan realized that it was overkill now, but after enough pumped up, it would be different. The Incomparable suddenly came up to him and asked, did the training add to his modesty? Chan was surprised and asked the manager in return, all amused by reading his thoughts. The Incomparable laughed and replied, an entertaining response. And would the boy like a little snack? Chan was surprised and remembered that he had been trained in the library. But would this man be the one to train him in the sword point of an incomparable warrior? But the Incomparable came to his senses and said he was a useless mentor. He's not going to teach him anything that way. And Chan was sorry, and it would be nice to learn the remaining techniques on his own. Incomparable asked the guy, does he think that a teacher and a student can only give and receive knowledge? Chan asked his mentor what he meant. The Peerless replied that he would teach him the remaining techniques from the Peerless Warrior's sword point. Mastering them completely would be impossible. Chan had already heard about the techniques, rejoiced, and began to thank the master for such a favor. The Incomparable replied, what a master! He considered it a shame. Chan was wondering at this moment how to deal with such a person. But right now, wouldn't it be easier to placate him a little, he thought. The Incomparable asked the disciple if he thought his thoughts were a little harsh right now. But in any case, it's fine. Before teaching him the sword point of the Peerless Warrior, he will give him a gift to honor his arrival on the second floor. Chan got excited and asked what it was. It's some sort of magic pill. The Incomparable suddenly placed 2 fingers on the guy's chest and let a stream of energy flow into him. Chan at this moment felt like he was in a lot of pain. It was as if his insides were twisted. Chan asked the master what it was, but the Incomparable One didn't stop and stuck his fingers in even deeper. Chan realized in a moment what the master wanted to do and shouted that it was innate chi. The Incomparable replied that here was his greeting on the second floor. Chan had obtained enough innate chi and became much stronger than before. His strength radiated from his body. But at one point he passed out and opened his eyes to hear Meng trying to bring him to his senses and calling him brother. Meng, seeing his brother open his eyes, said he was happy he was awake. But Chan stood up and didn't understand how he got here. Meng said he was worried when his brother fainted. But didn't his brother feel like he had gotten stronger? The small man asked. Chan looked and realized that he had become much stronger, and his innate chi began to circulate twice as fast. And it's absolutely delightful. But suddenly Ming asked, "What is that smell?" and asked his brother if his body was rotten. After taking off his clothes, Chan was so stinky that you could smell the strong odor of sweat from his body. Ming covered his nose and told his brother that he was dirty and stank. Chang felt his energy usage become easier and body waste products were now being expelled from his body. And the benefit of being on the second floor really changes it for the better. And then the incomparable one said, "Maybe it is. Change for the better is not that easy." Chan heard the master's voice and was a little surprised, and shouted to him, "How could it be?" At that moment, Chul came to the Alliance and asked the head, "What is he talking about?" The commander of one of the Alliance units, missing? The head replied that they say that on the way from Seoul, communication with him and with the entire squad who were carrying out the mission was cut off. Chin said he disappeared without a trace, and it was most likely an attack, not an accident. Let him go there and investigate. But Chul got angry and told his brother to talk about Son, and he will go there himself. The whole truth must be revealed. Suddenly the incomparable appeared and said that since there was so much waste coming out of the guy, it worked out. Chan asked him, how can he be outside the library? The incomparable one asked, and what a silly thing to say, doesn't he remember? Had he not met Yin outside the library? Chang remembered that. Come to think of it, he had met Madam outside the library a couple of times. But suddenly Ming asked his brother, is there someone here? But the incomparable called him a jerk and said they were communicating mentally. No need to say it out loud at all. Chan decided to correct this and replied that Chickpea, there's nothing here, and he's going to go to the water and wash up. Arriving at the lake, Chang asked the master, the gift from the second floor of the library isn't actually a transformation? The incomparable replied that of course not. What does he even mean by that word? Chan replied that he had heard that the body can change to better accept martial arts. The master asked, so what of it? Did anything change for the better? Chan replied, that of course it had. Inner chi had never circulated as easily as it did now. Master asked, is it innate chi? Do people use internal chi for martial arts? The metamorphosis itself lies in the concept, based on internal energy and dantian. If the change happened, all of his body's problems would evaporate and he would have a dantian. Chan thought, what if this really did happen to him one day, and he could still do it? Master said that he had just improved the circulation of his chi. In other words, there was only a partial change. And that's the end of the explanation. From tomorrow, they'll start training, and let Chan be ready for anything. Chan was happy and replied that it would be done. Suddenly Chan asked the master, how long does he plan to stay here? Master asked, is he in the way? But the master understood and said it was a little uncomfortable to have someone behind him, but the guy should understand him too. For the first time in 100 years, he had a chance to look at the world. Chan immediately said that Mrs. Ng wasn't like that when she came out of the library. She wasn't upset. The master replied that if we talk about the Yin girl, she is by nature a fan of sitting in a corner somewhere. And even when she was alive, she locked herself in the house and wouldn't come out. But Yun came out immediately and smacked him on the head and said when did he see her when she was alive? Yin started laughing and said she could do that without even going outside. Chan was surprised too and now understood everything. Master asked her, did she keep doing that? Couldn't he have just as easily struck, also popping out of nowhere? Yin asked him back, hadn't he failed her test 100 years ago? Or had he been hit on the head so hard that he had even forgotten about his failure? The master got angry and had already decided to do battle with her. But Chan saw this and told him to calm down. But suddenly a barrier suddenly appeared in front of them. And all three of them were shocked by this, and Yin said it was again. Zhang said it was definitely his Uncle Ha Chul. The boy caught up with his uncle and asked him where he was rushing to. Going down to the house, Chan said, this is the direction. Is he going back to the Alliance? Chul replied that yes and apologizes. He almost left without saying anything to him. Chang asked why the rush. Had something happened? Chul replied that in saying that, his Alliance unit had disappeared without a trace. And according to his brother, someone might have attacked them during the mission. They're really important to him as family. And if they're alive, he has an obligation to save them. If not, and clenching his fist, he became very angry and did not control himself. But Chan saw this and turned to him. But Chul comes to his senses and says they're breaking up, and he tells him such a depressing story. Chul told him to take care of himself and train hard. He can definitely become a great warrior. Chul applied his mobility powers and said that he too should save himself until their next meeting, and immediately flew away. Master said he has a nasty temper, but he is good at martial arts. The master asked the boy, does he like him? Zhang suddenly said they had to stop him, and he had completely forgotten in his previous life Ha Chul had died shortly after the ceremony. But he hadn't heard anything about the disappearance. The first thing he heard was that Chul is dead. So this disappearance and Chul's death are different incidents. And now Cheol is looking for the missing warriors. Someone's going to kill him out there, and if they don't stop him right now, he'll die soon. Master asked the guy, is he going to save him? Why would he do that? Chan replied that he had taught him the step of the heavenly god of thunder. He was acting for his benefit. Master said that he could partially interact with his memories through the library. Wasn't he a man who had no attachment to the Ha clan? Why was he suddenly so eager to save him? Chan immediately remembered his uncle telling him to train hard. He would become a great warrior. Chan rejoiced and said it was the first time he had heard such word from someone that affected him deeply. Chan used all his strength to catch up with his uncle. Chul sensed during the flight that he wasn't alone here and was on the alert. Chan took advantage of that moment and came down right in front of him to stop him. Chul was surprised and said it was unexpected. Chan tells his uncle that he can't go to Seon right now. Chul asked him what he meant by saying that. Chan replied that because it was dangerous, but he thought very long about his answer to change his uncle's mind. Chan at this point was just concentrating on catching up to him and couldn't think of a way to stop him. But would his uncle believe him if he said he knew the future? There's no way to make him stay. He can't handle him. Chul saw his nephew trembling and realized he was worried about him. And it's a wonderful child. Chul thanked him for his concern and said that he should go. But Chang replied that it wasn't like that. The boy realized that if this continued, Chul would definitely die. But Master suddenly told him to calm down. And he's in too much of a hurry, so he can't think. It's all about saving him. Stopping him is not their goal. Let him calm down and think. Chan began to think, how could he change the situation? He can't just immobilize Chul now. Let him go, and then he'll figure something out. And even if he goes to Seon now, how do you keep him from getting killed? And how to change the past? But what if someone was near Chul, he thought. Chan decided to use something else and shouted after his uncle. Chul heard him and turned around. He shouted to his uncle to find a warrior named Chu Hongdu in Seon. He is a master of pursuit, and for money, he will find anyone for him. Let him find him and work together to find the squad. And wondered how Chan knew of such men, but then decided it didn't matter. And spoiling himself in the sky, shouted to Chan that he thanked him for his help. The master told the boy that he was staying, but Chan asked, everything would be all right, wouldn't it? But Master replied that he doesn't know. By the way, is he sure of this Hongdu's abilities? Chan replied that yes, he had never met him himself, but he was familiar with the teacher. He is not easily persuaded to help, but once the contract is made, he will spare no life in accomplishing the task at hand. He has a good reputation among mercenaries, and now Chan decided that there was no point in worrying about it any longer. Now he had to mind his own business. Chan looked up suddenly and said that it was already dawn, and it was time for them to start, and he would now go to the library. The handyman was pleased and said, great. The user's wish is confirmed. He immediately moved them to the second floor. Chan said that they would now learn the next technique of the Peerless Warrior's sword point. The master asked the boy what it was about. He wouldn't be able to do that. Chan was surprised and told the master that he had promised to tell him. Why all of a sudden? The master replied that he would train him, but he didn't have the qualifications yet. Chan asked in surprise, qualifications? What does he lack for her? The master kicked sharply on the ground and moved them to another place. Chan was surprised, but the master told him to calm down. It was okay. And the tip of the incomparable warrior's sword is literally a sword created out of nothing while achieving the end result. And that's why it's called incomparable. The master decided to demonstrate and made a cut with his sword and surrounded them with energy. Chang was shocked and thought, how did the master achieve such results using only the heavenly distinction of an incomparable warrior? The master said that 100 different people would require 100 different ways. That's what he thinks. It is the soul, chi, and body. It is not formed from these three harmoniously developed components. And now Chan, he is now experiencing a serious imbalance of body and chi. His inner chi is far beyond what his body can perceive. He's fine now, but over time his body may not be able to take it. If this continues, there will be a great deal of destruction. The master asked the guy, did he understand now? Therein lies the problem with the incomparable warrior's sword point. And he's missing important details. Chan asked what were the other important details. The master did not tell him at once, and after taking off his clothes, answered that the muscles. And to put it simply, he just needs to bring the state of his body to the level of his internal energy. Chan was shocked and asked why. The master hugged him and said he could back him up if needed. After that, Chan began to feel regret, and that feeling of remorse for the mistakes he had made. So now he is filled with regret. After much training, Chan realized that his decision on this day was just crazy. And how will he ever survive this ordeal? And any martial arts are forbidden to him. People can't do that. And now he's having second thoughts about getting the hell out of here. The master read his thoughts and laughed and told him to try to get away. He wouldn't even be able to get away from him, much less escape. Chan looked at the master and saw that he kept backing up. That's easy. Suddenly, we came in and told the master it was time to add weight. And is everything okay? Chan asked him if he added as much as Yui thought he would he get mad at him? We replied that the master would get angry if he didn't add weight. And hadn't he asked him not to even listen to his pleas for mercy? Putting another 8 pounds on his hands, he apologized. And the master just needs to be patient a little longer. Chan was already at his limit and said that it was possible to die. But the master told him not to worry about it. He had calculated everything in such a way that Chan could not die. We told the master to get ready immediately. Chan tried to resist and realized he had to. After an hour, Chan fell to the ground and threw all the weights away. But the pain was so unbearable that he even screamed at the top of his voice. We started clapping and told the master that it had been a long time, and he did a very good job. But the master asked the lad, and what special thing had he done? Is he going to get up? Cleaning up is part of the training too. Chan thought that if the master let him go, Wui's guard would clean up the mess. The master asked the lad, is his guard his own servant? Does he want to make the older man work for him? Chan replied that their age difference was not that great. The master was surprised and asked him why he was so quick to answer. Chan yelled at the master for being too noisy, all because he argues with him endlessly. But the master looked at him with his gaze and asked again, who would clean up everything? Chan suddenly told we to leave it and he would clean it up himself. We replied to the master that he was so tired after training, maybe he shouldn't. Chan replied that it was fine. He still has enough strength to clean up his mess. Chan realized in his mind that he couldn't be tired. He needs a balance of chi and body energy to master the incomparable warrior's sword point technique. He must gather himself and become stronger. The master suddenly put his huge hand on his head and asked, is he crazy? Why is he smiling? And now he realizes he underestimated Chan. He can't properly calculate his capabilities. And starting tomorrow, you should add more weight. Double what you have now. Chan was surprised and asked, double? The next day, Chan started to run already with the scales in his arms. But suddenly we came shouting to his master. Every day, he kept working out and working out. But the exercises on his body were always different. And 3 years later, Chan turned 16. And his body had changed so much that he couldn't believe it himself. Suddenly, the master looked at his student and saw that enough was enough now. For the past 3 years, he had made him practice every day. He has learned many things about his body, as well as the incomparable warrior's sword point. He feels that his body has become stronger. This should now be enough to absorb So Wandan's remaining energy. And this is not to be compared to the abuse and humiliation he had endured in his past life at this time. And now he can even go traveling. Things are changing rapidly in the central chamber, and war is breaking out. And he must go there and survive. And then he will save his Minner's life, which he failed to do last time. The next day, the head finds out and personally asks his son that he is leaving on a trip. Chan replied that yes, he should gain experience. Therefore, he wants to go as soon as possible. The head became curious and asked where to. Chang replied that he wanted to start by passing through Shaanxi province to visit the Dan clan in Sakong, and then take part in a meeting at Dragon Peak in Hubei province. After that, he will go to Hanam. The head was surprised and asked Sakon. Chang replied that he had promised to visit them 3 years ago, and in fact he had a lot to gain in Sakon. The head didn't really want to let him go and pretended to listen and give him permission. But the master told the guy that how uncomfortable it was here. Chan asked him, aren't they good friends? After the ceremony, they hardly crossed paths. The master replied, there is no choice. And about that, aren't they being followed? Chan said he had already noticed the surveillance, and it's probably needed to limit his actions or learn about his techniques. The head told him that if he went to Seishan, let him take this with him. He handed him the scroll. Chan took it and asked with surprise, a letter? Should he give it to Head Dan? The head replied that no, this letter is not for him, and ordered him to tell his uncle. He's in Seishan right now. Zhang was surprised and asked, Uncle? Zhang realized that Chiol had actually survived, and the plan he had made that day had completely worked. The head said, they say his uncle has changed a lot. Chan asked in surprise, changed? The head replied that it had been years since he had gone to investigate the disappearance of his squad, and even the bodies of his subordinates had yet to be found. This previously cheerful man became gloomy and sullen. In addition, he confronted the alliance leader, who refused to provide troops for the investigation. They say he left the alliance and things just got worse. And he's got nothing more to say anyway. Chang asked the head if he had contacted him. The head replied that Shul only sends letters and they only have to receive them. And he didn't want to go into the details of the situation. Chan realized that his father had always been indifferent to his children. He shows emotion when he talks about his brother. But the head tells Chan that Shul is attached to him. So he can't help but be relieved when he finds out that he's planning to leave. Chan wondered if he would get the information. He agreed and said okay. Tomorrow morning, as soon as the sun rose, he would set off. We after the chapter just found out about it and asked with surprise, traveling? Chan replied that he had already gotten permission from the chapter. They leave tomorrow morning and let him start packing. But we rejoiced and said, he will get everything ready right away. Chang sat back in his chair and thought that he would have to stop by Seishan first, and perhaps meet the head of the Dan clan. And then he remembered how San had offered him betrothal to her daughter, and how he had refused that time. Chan thought he had a good excuse. But suddenly Chan began to scream, for someone had covered his eyes. He asked who it was. The girl answered who. Ha So-eun, his little sister. She asked him what was that look. He didn't forget his only sister, did he? Chan replied that no, it was just unexpected. He actually felt awkward and thought, why did his sister come to see him? But in this life and in the past life, he and Yin had nothing in common. Yin said to her brother, the situation seems rather awkward. Would her brother invite her for a snack? Chan remembered that she had always been special. After all, in the future, she would be able to fight back against the one dubbed the Swordsman Rakshasa and become the most famous among her peers. And her ambition was so great. And in her first life, striving to become the head of the family, she competed with everyone. In order to strengthen her position, Chan started to repeat himself. Appetizers are appetizers, but why is she here? Yin asked her brother, is he being so direct? Chan replied that she has a peculiar character, so let her talk. Yin replied that she hates to beat around the bush. Yin made a serious face and told her brother that she came to him today with a request. Chan was surprised and asked a request if she wants to ask to support her in the battle for the throne. But Yin interrupted him and said that's not what she meant. Yin said she's the head of the Golden Five. That's why she wants to cure her grandfather. She can only be helped by a divine doctor from the Great Heavenly Five. Can he help her contact him? Chan replied that the members of the Great Heavenly Five do not come because they are offered money. Besides, how would he know where they were? Un immediately replies to him that they're in Sation. Jang now knows that the divine doctor is in Sation too. In fact, the divine physician of the Great Heavenly Five is named Hua Jin Beck. He called himself a descendant of Hua Tu, and there is no other such physician skilled in acupuncture and herbal medicine. But after losing his granddaughter to people who wanted his skills, he went mad. In search of those involved in her death, he killed people in the world's most brutal ways. And so he wiped out 5 clans and earned himself a new nickname, the Obsessed Doctor. Yin said that she discovered information that he is now helping the sick in Sation's villages. Chan thought that if this was true, he could save his granddaughter and change the future. He rejoiced greatly, for this was his chance to save the divine doctor. Chan agreed and suggested to her that they find it together. Got excited and asked, really? She hugged her brother tightly and said she knew he would listen to her. Chan pushed her away and said he had a condition. Yin was surprised and asked what other conditions. Chan replied, 20 pieces of silver. He always remembered that a doctor is a doctor, but he must get his own. Yin said it's too much. Are all brothers like that? Chan asked her back, since when did he and her become close? The master asked him too, is he taking money from a little girl? Heartless. But Chan gave him a look and told him to shut up. The master said that everyone who loves money gets bald, and he wouldn't want to be without hair at that age. Chan replied that he was still young. It was okay. Yin came and said here are 10 coins for him and let him count. Jang told her that she would give the rest later and let her remember that. Un replied that she had already given him the money, so he should take her to Sation and take her back. Chan was surprised and asked what? Yin replied that he was trying to swindle 20 coins from her for that. Isn't that a lot? Chang replied that they would serve them to the highest standard. However, she only plans to take 1 guard. Yin looked AI asked him, is he what about Snow White? But it's okay. Snow White is strong. It's enough just for her. Chan looked and saw that she looked strong. The rough hands show that she is a true warrior. Yin told Snow White that she must protect her and her brother and herself. And she asked her brother if 1 guard was enough for him. Chan replied that he was strong too, and 1 man would be enough for him. He realized that he had been training hard for the past 3 years. So much so that the fame of his skill had spread beyond their domain. In any case, Chan said, let him have faith in his brother. He'll get her there quickly and safely. And if it takes too long, he'll give her money back. Yin was surprised and asked, really? Chan answered her that this was the plain truth. But suddenly he saw a light between the gates, and which began to open before him. He remembered that in his past life, he couldn't handle discrimination and abuse. And it was as if he was running away, walking out that door. However, he is now confidently setting out to explore the world, and no one is going to stop him from doing so. Sun Yin got tired and asked, how much farther do they have to go? Chang replied that they were on the road from Hanam to Shangxi, so they should walk some more. Yin became curious and continued to ask, is it really safe to walk around here like this? Are there no bandits in this forest by any chance? Chang started laughing and replied that they were not far from the Shaolin Lover's path. Why would they be here? Suddenly, someone put a sword under his head and told him that he would only stay alive if he gave up everything he had. Yi looked and said they were bandits. And Yin started to get indignant and told her brother that he said it was safe in this forest. Snow White said that it was strange that the bandits had gathered here. We replied that she was right, too. This forest is part of the Ha family's holdings and other family. It is not a place for bandits. The bandit said he works with the main man in Shaanxi province. He thinks he would be frightened that these lands belong to someone. Chang turned around and asked with surprise, the main man in Shaanxi. Chan asked the guys, did they know who it was? Yin replied that it was the first time she had heard. Bandito got angry and started yelling at them that they were creatures. He didn't resist them for long and immediately began brandishing his sword. But Chan saw it coming and dodged it. The bandit asked them how they felt about their greatness. Chan replied that his power was great, but that was the end of it. An also said that brother is right. The bandit has almost no martial arts skills. Bandito answered them if they were not too small, and called them puppies lastly. But now they will see how they will sing when they bring him back. The bandit ordered his men to show him up. Chan was shocked and wondered who they were going to show. Suddenly, he saw a big move, and the bandits dragged a guy who was almost unconscious. Chan immediately looked and said that the plum flower pattern on his robes, there was no way that could be. The bandit replied that he was. This guy is a plum blossom swordsman from the Alliance. He dares to stand in the way of a great master. Chan realized that if it was really the plum blossom swordsman, then he was truly an outstanding warrior of the Alliance, and he had fallen for such bandits. The bandit gave his men permission to attack and said they too would soon be in his shoes, and ordered his men to all attack at the same time, or better yet, have them kill them at once. The guys were already ready to fight them and were waiting for that moment for them to come up. But Chan didn't play with them for long and pulled out his sword and immediately chopped off the bandit's head using his fourth technique. And this is his best heaven-splitting incomparable warrior. Everyone was shocked. Even the guys didn't expect this turn of events. The bandits said the master was defeated. And it's not just a guy, it's a monster. And they need to get out of here right now. But Chan decided not to let them live either, and went through them with great speed and finished them off. After the killing, he said no, none of them would leave. Leaving a few hostages behind, they tied them up. Chan said it turns out they're a gang based in Shaanxi, and he doesn't know what purpose they went here for. The bandit replied that it was. We went up to him and said that if it was a lie, he would die in agony. Placing the knife under his head, the bandit began to shout that it was true, and that they would believe him. Snow White told Mistress that she didn't think he was lying. Yin immediately replied that the guys they questioned said the same thing. Chang thought the guys who were hanging around in Shaanxi suddenly came to Seishan, and then they ran into them, and it seems to be a coincidence. The master asked the boy, he wouldn't be so gullible, would he? Chan replied that there was no point in doing anything with them, since no one would give out information. Or maybe they really are just ignorant assholes. The bandit was ready to die, but he was still begging them for mercy. Chan told them to tell them of any of the commanders who might know some information. The bandit replied that the head and all the remaining troops were in Shaanxi Fortress, and perhaps the deputy head could know why they went here. Chan asked who was the deputy head. The bandit replied that the man he had massacred earlier was the deputy head. Chan was surprised and said that the difference in numbers was too great and he had to take the initiative. Yin replied to her brother that no, and good for him. Chan looked at her and said that somehow she was talking weird, no? Yin laughed and asked, is it? Chan thought for a moment and said it would be a good idea to report them to headquarters. But suddenly the prisoner spoke and said a few words. The guy said they saved his life, and now he was grateful to the master. Chan replied that he had just done what he had to do. Chan saw the guy and noticed that he looked very sickly, and it looked like he was about to fall. The master suddenly said that it had been a long time since he had seen anyone like him. Chan looked up and was surprised at master's words. The master asked the guy, doesn't he get it? And now he's betting that Chan just hasn't run into them yet. And they're not the kind of people who are easy to meet. Chan asked the master what he was talking about. Suddenly, Guy started coughing loudly and opened his mouth so wide that he was ready to die on the spot. Chan approached him and asked if he was okay. The guy replied that he had made an oversight. Chan saw that no matter how one looked at it, it didn't look like a simple cough. Why would such a man go somewhere alone? Yin told the guy that he looked like a master apprentice from the Alliance. What's his pain? Does he have a cold or something? Snow White said immediately to Mistress that it was impolite to talk like that. When asked why, everyone is curious, aren't they? The master saw this and said she was an evil little girl. Zhang replied that was right. The guy replied that it wasn't a disease, it was all about his peculiarities. Yin asked with surprise, peculiarities? The guy asked them if they had ever heard the term hidden artery. Yin understood that a hidden artery was someone who naturally had a high level of energy, which allowed them to learn martial arts faster than others. But their bodies can't handle that energy, so they die young. And if it isn't an Alliance fighter? Chan asked him, is he by any chance the head of the Plum Blossoms? The guy was surprised and asked, "Do they know each other?" And then Chan realized that this guy was the head of the Plum Blossoms, a Plum Blossom swordsman who had burst into the Alliance like a comet. And he's the next head of the Alliance, a great master that no one could even think of manifesting. The boy remembered and said that when he was a boy, he was taken in as an apprentice by one of Wei Zhen's elders. The elder asked him if he wanted to go with him, and after that he had no other option and agreed. After a while, thanks to a hidden artery, he was able to learn martial arts much faster than his peers. He became a fine warrior worthy of his master. But lately he began to feel that he had very little left to live for. So he left Wasan, and he came down from the mountains to find a cure. And then he fainted and fell. And when he came to, he had already been caught. Chan thought he kept wondering how they had managed to catch him. And they didn't catch him, they just picked him up. And in his past life, he was able to heal his hidden artery perfectly. And then he became the head of the Alliance at such a young age. He was known as a true knight, and despite the nature of his powers, Chan asked him when he was going to return to Wasan again, and called him a master at the end. But the guy replied that he wasn't a master. In fact, he was a real master, and suddenly his body started to deteriorate, and he started coughing a lot. Chan told him to take it easy. The guy replied that he would just rest a bit and head straight back. "It's a little embarrassing, but I'd hate to die so early." Chan asked who wants to die, but thought, how did this guy cure his ailment? And he seemed to have heard something about it. And suddenly remembered said, passing through the Guangzhou countryside, he fulfilled the request of the village chief. It was said that he had destroyed a monstrous bear that had plagued the village for years out of a sense of gratitude. The headman caught and gave him a carp. And it was a sun carp. He doesn't know if the sun carp actually exists, but he's sure that's where he found a way to cure his hidden artery. Chan wondered if he should go there right after station and try to catch some carp. But he changed his mind, for if he caught a sun carp, the disease would ruin the master. Chan told the guy what he was going to tell him. The guy asked the master what he was talking about. Chang replied that he had heard rumors that a miraculous creature with the power of the sun lived in the countryside of Guangzhou province. If he had time for it, he thought it was worth going there. The master called him a fool and asked him if he would believe it if he heard such a thing. Chan said that of course it was just a rumor and he wasn't sure if it would help. The guy replied that it's okay, he's really grateful to them, and the man who saved his life couldn't advise him badly. He would definitely go there. Chan told the chapter that he wished him good luck. The master asked the guy right away what's going on. Chan asked what's wrong. The master replied to him that the lad had saved him a decent sum. Let him not forget that debt. Was he planning to say something like that? Chang replied that as he would become the next head of Wasan, let him remember that. But what does the master think? Would money be able to buy the favor of such a man?